Sorry.
Thanks. I would like to call the Town of Rocky Hill Planning and Zoning regular meeting to order Wednesday, December 15, 2021 at 6:30. We have a public hearing scheduled, item 1A.
Site plan special permit application, Belfonte Companies LLC. Care of Joseph P. Williams Esquire, Shipman and Goodwin LLP, proposing a mixed-use development of 213 apartments, 93 one-bedroom and 120 two-bedroom, with 10% designated as affordable, 10,000 square feet of office space and 9,500 retail or other commercial space, with associated site improvements on approximately 12.2 acres for property located at 2418 Main Street in the TC Town Center Zoning District, ID 10-184.
Thank you. Kim, do you have any announcements for?
There is a speaker list in the back of the room. Okay, so when it's time, we'll be calling names on that list. I would ask, as presenters or people who are speaking or asking questions, if we could have other people refrain from speaking as we are recording the meeting. We do have a handheld mic up front here at the podium, so if it's your turn and you wish to use that, feel free to do so. I don't know if you have.
No, I think that's about it. And you want to?
Time. You do that when they ask questions. The time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll talk about it. Time.
Yeah,
So.
Well, I could state on the record, I mean, we have different members here this evening than we had the first meeting. Before the first meeting, those members that were present was Giuseppe Aglico, Guy Dupeau, Victor Zerilli, Dimple Desai, Ronald Robbins, and Nancy Brescia. And I think the chairman may want to go over, we have.
Yeah, so I think the seated commissioners would be, Commissioner Robbins, Commissioner, do you want to go over just for Commissioner Mudhouse, just to make sure like everything is reviewed and all that?
Oh, interrogate me.
Yeah.
No, I mean, who's going to be seated this evening?
Yeah.
We just want to make sure for the cleanest process, as far as legalities go and no challenges, that obviously.
But he sends his regards and his appreciation to everyone. And I also want to say that our entire team appreciates the focus and the diligence of this commission and all of town staff who have worked on this matter. We also appreciated the substantially positive feedback that we heard about our proposal coming in through emails and through speakers at the last hearing from businesses and property owners in the neighborhood. What we'd like to try to do tonight, Mr. Chairman, is to try our best to answer by categories the requests that came into us at the last hearing from commission members and from the public that are material to your decision. And we have written comments from the town planners and town engineer. And I think it's fair to say our team views those as mostly technical detail kind of comments, and we would be happy to accept them as conditions of approval if the commission was inclined to approve the application. So I don't know that we'll need to spend a whole lot of time on them tonight unless somebody brings up something in particular. We did not view them as problematic, and we view them as things that we can fairly readily accomplish and would be glad to do so, and to submit compliant details to staff after an approval if we get an approval. So that's what I wanted to say about those. And if there are any other questions that come forward tonight that we hadn't heard already, then we will do our best to answer them on the spot, and we hope to place the commission in a position to feel like it would be fine to close the public hearing tonight if you're comfortable doing that. So we hope to have answered everything and given you the information you need to do that. After a few things from me, you will then hear from Tom Daly, who you met last time, our lead civil engineer from SLR Consulting. And Tom will cover both engineering and traffic topics in our response to the questions that were raised. He will touch on public amenities like extending the sidewalks that we were asked about, and some of the site plan questions that came up. Then we'll hear from Mark Forlenza from Belfonte Companies. Mark will speak a little more broadly and historically, if you will, about the development of our plan, the feedback that the team received along the way from town officials, and the evolution of the plan in response to that feedback. He'll explain the proportions of the various uses, residential, retail, and office that we have proposed, and why the team chose the proposed location for the retail and office uses, and just explain why we feel strongly that what we have presented to you is a good balance that will succeed in today's marketplace. Then finally, you'll hear from, and last but not least, you'll hear from James Anderson, our lead project architect with Studio Architects. And James will go over our design rationale and respond to some of the feedback we received in the Village District Consultant's memo. I have given you, and I believe everybody has now, a printout of both the slides from last time, which I should have brought you last time, and a printout of the slides that we will show you tonight, so you all have that. First thing amongst the responses that I'm handling, I wanted to do is just confirm a couple of things in response to questions that came up. First, the number of parking spaces is 421, as is correctly shown on the site plans and on the parking study. There were probably different numbers from prior iterations of drafts of things that were going around that stayed on there, but what we have presented to you in the plan is what you would be approving if you choose to do so. And so the 421 that's shown on the plan and is discussed in the parking study, that's the number. Second, we asked SLR to go back and check on the setbacks that we were asked about, and it is correct that the setbacks in the front for the two buildings that have their main frontage on Main Street is 6 feet. So we are asking the commission to approve that setback as shown on the plan. Well, I'm not changing anything. I'm just confirming the plan does show 6 feet, and that was correctly pointed out. And that's entirely to try to advance what we believe was the design vision and the objectives that were stated by the commission in your town center regulation, to try to give that town center look by having the buildings closer to the street. And one other confirmation. The team went back and ran calculations on all the building heights, because that was asked about. And you have a memo from James Anderson in your packet this evening confirming all the building heights. And it notes that all of the heights comply with the 45-foot limitation, except for Building 7, which James can point out and talk about. It's a 3-4-story split apartment building in the middle of the site, and as James talks about in his memo, and he can explain more when he comes up, that building was given an extra gable in the middle of the building essentially for purposes of architectural distinction, and we thought it was a better design. And because of doing that, and the way the building is sort of nestled in with the existing topography, trying to work with that topography, it results in that building being 1.5 feet over the height limitation, and that's the only one. So we are asking you to approve that height as well as shown on the plan, which you can do under the town center regulation. So that's point number one, just confirmation of those few things. Number two, we were asked about evidence of historical or archaeological resources on the site. I believe that was Commissioner Robbins. And what we did was the following. Just so you all know, I don't know if you've ever dealt with this, but when you're undertaking a construction project on a larger site like this one, you're required by state law to register with the state DEP under their general permit for the discharge of stormwater from construction activities, and that's on the delegation of the Federal Clean Water Act responsibility to the state. And when you register for that general permit for stormwater, the DEP actually requires you to report if the property is in an area of historical significance. So you have to do a little research on that and submit it to them and make sure it actually goes before the State Historic Preservation Officer, which people call the SHPO. you have to make sure the SHPO agrees. What we did here, just to advance the discussion, was SLR, our engineering firm, submitted a preliminary analysis to SHPO, the same thing that we will need to do officially with DEEP if and when we submit for the general permit after receiving local approvals. And in the preliminary submission, SLR suggested to SHPO that it appears to us that our property at 2418 Main Street is not in an area of historical significance based on research into the National Register of Historic Places, which the site is not on, and into local ordinances. We are not located in any local historic district or designated as a locally historically significant property. The building was built in 1965, which is just over the cusp of being old enough that you need to make that submission, or you need to check the box and tell SHPO about it when you submit to DEP. But I think anybody with knowledge on historical resources would agree. Our consultant looked at it and said, it doesn't seem like this building would qualify. And on December 10th, somebody from the State Historic Preservation Office wrote back to SLR and said, I agree with your assessment. So we have that preliminary review from SHPO that they didn't see any significance to historical resources on the property, not surprisingly. With regard to archaeological resources, we don't know of any database that you would search like SLR did on the historical side. Typically, you would find any archaeologically significant items during construction when you're excavating. That's when you might turn up, a variety of things, arrowheads or whatever might be on the site. So our answer to that is simply, we don't know of any evidence of any archaeologically significant resources on the site right now. That's also not surprising because, as we talked about last time, the site is almost 100% covered with building and pavement. But I looked back at the factors for decision in your zoning regulations for site plans and for special permits, and it seems to be talking about what one would expect for this topic, which is look for any evidence of archaeologically significant resources, and if you find any, then make efforts to preserve them or see if somebody wants to keep them, or at least take a look at it and pause and see what can be done about it. And that's the way we understand the regulation, and of course, we're happy to comply with that. So we don't have any evidence right now, but short answer is if we find any, we will comply with your regulation. So that's our response on that topic. Number 3, for me, we were also asked to provide a demolition plan. So I believe you have a memorandum from Associated Construction Company. That's going to be hopefully our general contractor for the project, and they gave a fairly detailed list of, as a general statement, how they plan to deal with anything that needs to be abated in the building, like asbestos, and then how the demolition in stages will proceed. Keeping in mind this is something that would be the subject, hopefully, of a more detailed discussion with the site contractor, the building official, fire marshal, if they need to be involved, town engineer, a bunch of people that get together when the plans are advancing in more detail toward construction. But for now, since we were asked, he prepared that plan that tells you how everything will be done and assures the commission that all abatement and demolition will be handled professionally and in compliance with state and federal law. So you have that memo from Mr. Jankowski of Associated Construction. 4th point for me, we were asked about how many school-age children will be generated by this development. And I want to begin just as an overall point that we all need to keep in mind, which I'm sure you've heard before, that our state courts have ruled many times, including cases I've been involved with, that for a zoning commission to focus on or to base a decision on costs that might be generated by a development or revenue that might be created by a development is considered fiscal zoning, FISCAL, fiscal zoning, and our courts have said that's impermissible. That's not a legal basis for a zoning commission to render its decision. Rather, your decision, of course, is to be based on your zoning regulations and the general statutes. And we also have to keep in mind the federal and state fair housing acts that protect against discrimination against families with children. But having said that, with that in mind, we are certainly willing to share our experience and to talk about our expectations. which has been consistently confirmed, and that is that apartments with 1 and 2 bedrooms, like we are proposing, generate very minimal amounts of school-age children. And we expect that this community will not even come close to burdening the Rocky Hill Public School System in any way. And we were actually, after our discussion last time, we were running calculations of our own when we received a very helpful memorandum that I believe the commission has, or you should have, that was written by Ray Carpentino to the commission on December 10th. And we've gone over Mr. Carpentino's memo and found that we find it to be thorough and well-researched and well-reasoned. And we agree with his analysis, the reasons for it, and his ultimate conclusion that this proposed apartment community likely will generate something less than 15 school-age children. And we did our own analysis using nationally recognized and industry standard data, and it yielded a similar conclusion. So we believe confidently, as I said, that this development is not going to overburden the Rocky Hill schools, and we're looking at something maybe in the range of 15 school-age children, and of course that can be spread throughout all grades in the public school system from kindergarten through 12th grade. So from our perspective, we have no question that our new community will be a net positive asset to Rocky Hill for many years to come. And on that note, last point from me, we were asked about how do we know that this community, when built, will not, to use the language of your regulations, will not depreciate or impair the value of properties in the neighborhood. And to that, I would say there's 3 main pieces of evidence before you. The first is, of course, that we believe we are proposing some drastically positive neighborhood enhancements, one that will not create any negative impacts on neighboring properties. Just to summarize what we talked about last time, and you can spend 4 hours watching on a video if somebody wanted to do that. But we're removing a blight on the neighborhood, obviously. And we are providing what we view as an aesthetic transformation of a major property at a significant location on the entrance into the commercial corridor of Rocky Hill. Substantially upgrading the landscaping and screening on the property and improving the stormwater treatment and management on the property, all with a relatively quiet use that will not be disruptive and will not create external impacts on its neighbors. So to a team of very experienced developers and engineers and architects, we know that those are the things that are positive for property values in the area, not negative to property values. But piece of evidence number 2, you don't have to just take our word for it. You have testimony in front of you by neighboring property owners and neighboring business owners that they want this kind of development and exactly the proposal that we are making on this site. You had multiple speakers at the public hearing, of course. You had a letter from Representative Kerry Wood. You had a very nice email from the Baglias, all talking about how this site needs what we are proposing, and they view it as a positive transformation, one that will bring energy and vibrancy and beauty to an area that has lacked it for decades. You also had, I thought, some very helpful emails from Curtis Clemens, who owns a real estate brokerage firm just up the street on the Silas Dean Highway, who gave his opinion that what we are proposing is the highest and best use for this property and will be positive to the property values surrounding it. And Mr. Clemens is the type of person that we would often hire, or we didn't hire, we didn't even talk to him about it, but often people will bring in somebody of his professional background and expertise, somebody who buys and sells properties all the time, to give what's called a broker's opinion of value. And so the type of opinion that he gave about the proposal being accretive and positive to property values surrounding it, I believe should be credited by the commission. And this is somebody who, he said in his email, has lived in Rocky Hill for more than 35 years, and he's a business owner in the real estate business right here, right on the Silas Dean Highway. So that was a good opinion. You also had an email from James Mitchell, who stated that he owns properties on 3 different streets right in the area and strongly endorsed the project and recommended your approval. So to me, that piece of evidence, all of those comments, tells you that your market, which is the businesses, the people who own property around the site, all desire and support the project. That tells you that it will improve property values because people will want to buy property and invest here if you're getting that kind of reaction. Third piece of evidence is what we're giving you tonight, and you should have in front of you, which is a real estate impact analysis that we retained since the last hearing from a very experienced appraisal firm, Norman Benedict Associates, Inc., located in Hamden. And there's a few, I'm just going to summarize a few of the points he gives you because I know you haven't had a chance to read it yet. And it is a fairly detailed statement of Mr. Benedict's opinion. N.R. Benedict Jr. is his name. And he gives a 6-page, single-spaced statement of his opinions. And some of the points he makes is, first of all, he sets the backdrop by making sure you know what he knows, which is there has been, for years, a decreasing demand for office space in the marketplace, and so he concludes it's highly unlikely that anyone else would use the existing building and property for the use that it formerly had as a single-tenant office building. He concludes also, this is on page 4 of his opinion, that a large, hulking, abandoned office and warehouse building is a negative influence on the neighborhood. So simply redeveloping the property with something else in itself is a positive because it basically stops the bleeding, stops the drag on the property values of the neighborhood that this blight is causing. Also on page 4, he notes that our proposal will not create an oversupply of similar kinds of apartments in the neighborhood and in the immediate area. The reason he says that is because if you create an oversupply of something, you could hurt the property values of like uses around it because you would be diluting the demand for them by creating a lot more supply. But there really aren't in this immediate area, as he says, apartments of the Class A high amenity quality that we are proposing, so you're not basically creating too much competition with a similar kind of use. On page 5, he talks about what if the alternative was creating an entirely retail-based development. And at the top of page 5, he says, if new Class A retail space is developed at this location, it would have a detrimental impact on the value of existing retail space in the market because of the increase of supply relevant to demand, which is experiencing higher levels of stress due to the influence of the internet and the recent C-19 pandemic. So he's explaining that what I think most of us know is that retail is hurting and is in big trouble. That's why you don't see a lot of new development of retail around the state of Connecticut. And what he's saying is this proposal makes sense and is a good balance of uses because if it was weighted too heavily toward retail space, then there's just not enough demand. You would be hurting the existing retail businesses that you have in Rocky Hill, particularly on the Silas Deane Highway, and you would be limiting their value by creating an overabundance of supply. Next, he notes that apartments, conversely, are a positive influence to the retail market because, like we pointed out last time, you're bringing in customers. You're bringing in people who are active, who are, many of them at the higher end of the income scale. They have money to spend. They need stuff. They want to be entertained. And they want to do stuff in their neighborhoods. So it's a positive influence for the retail market in the area just to have new apartments be built. And then also at the bottom of page 5, he says that in his opinion, our proposal would not just be neutral on property values, but would be a positive influence on the community and surrounding property values. And then over on page 6, the last page of his opinion, he talks from the perspective of single-family homes in the neighborhood. And he states his opinion that the owners of single-family homes in the residential neighborhood contiguous to the studied property would most likely be happier with residential development, even if it's multi-unit oriented, to the far louder, more disruptive, and undesirable commercial development, which is technically allowed under zoning. So what he's saying is an all retail or commercial site that maybe had entertainment venues or whatever it might be is actually more disruptive and may hurt single-family home values around it when compared with what we're doing, which will not. So that's just a summary of the report that we've given you today from N.R. Benedict Jr., and I commend that to your reading. And that concludes the items that I needed to catch you up on. Mr. Chairman, unless there are any questions for me, I'd like to bring up Tom Daly now to go over his part.
No, I think we'll wait to finish your presentation.
Great.
And then public comments.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, Tom Daly with SLR Consulting. I'm a senior civil engineer there. And also, while not presenting right now, we have Emily Foster from our office, who's a traffic engineer, so if any questions come on that. And we also have David Dixon, who's a senior landscape architect. So we have a full complement to answer any questions, but for the efficiency, I'll be presenting those our initial responses. So last month, or excuse me, at the last meeting, we took a lot of notes, and but as you know, we didn't really have a chance to come up and respond or give you clarification. So there's no my notes are somewhat random. They include both commission member questions and neighbor questions, but let's roll through it. So one question came up about snow storage. There is no designated large snow storage areas. Sometimes you see in shopping malls. I know one where they put a big pile over there, and about June 15th, it melts away. That's not the case here. What will happen here, as it happens in all of other Bellefonte properties, is small snow events will be plowed to the curb, but anything of significance will have to be put into the back of a truck and taken off site. As you can see from the site plan and just the quality of for the life of the residents, there's just not that place to put that huge snow pile. But the one thing you heard last time is Bellefonte not only builds their projects, they actually actively manage those also. So we're very well versed, and that's pretty commonplace. One of the neighbors on Pratt Street requested that an evergreen screen be placed along his property line. He suggested that. I believe it was the gentleman who spoke about lighting. If you take a close look at our landscape plan, we are already proposing a evergreen landscape. We actually called it an evergreen screen, actually, along the property line. So along those property lines, we are already putting a robust evergreen four-season screen along those properties. It's not only there, we're actually putting that type of screening around the entire perimeter of the site. There was a question about impervious cover. So we really there's two impervious coverage calculations in our submittal. The zoning data table on the title sheet, that is just for the parcel, and it's calculated per your calculations. In the drainage calculation, it's the impervious calculation on the watershed area. If you go along Pratt Street, we have people that are draining onto our property that have impervious coverage, so that's why the two numbers are different. The watershed area is actually much bigger than the site itself. Give you an example, the watershed area is just under 2 acres bigger. But if you even look at the aerial photo, there's a bunch of big paved areas. Well, number one, Dividend Drive is that commercial on the corner. That all drains to our site. So that's why you're seeing a bigger number in the drainage calculations than you are on the title sheet. In terms of, there was a request or a suggestion of a sidewalk along Pratt Street. Where the office building is going, that is the only area, plus where we have access onto Pratt Street. So we have a small section of frontage along our parcel. It's about 135 feet that fronts on Pratt Street. We would be willing to install sidewalk along that area, but it would somewhat there'd be a gap, about 135 feet of sidewalk and another gap in front of the two residential properties. But, and I think Kim Ritchie spoke to this about what the commission asked, but we as the applicant is willing to install the sidewalks along 1 Dividend and 6 and 8 Pratt Street, but that is with the town getting temporary grading rights. I went out there, took a look at it, and there's a little bit of a rise there. You can't put the sidewalk could fit in there, but you have to kind of just blend the topo back into the people's yards. So if the town can get those temporary grading rights, the applicant is willing to install basically a sidewalk all the way from the corner of Dividend and Pratt all the way down to our entrance drive. But we don't have topo out there, but my experience is it's just not so flat. You need to kind of blend that lawn in over there. But once again, if we can get the town to get us temporary grading rights, we could do that work. There was a question about the bus stop. We as the applicant, and when I say we, it's the applicant speaking, I'm speaking on their behalf, we're more than happy to talk about moving the bus shelter, understanding where the crosswalk needs to be, understanding if there is a sidewalk connection. But there's very important people that are not in this room that need to be parties. Not only that, not only are they parties, they're really decision makers. We have Connecticut DOT. I think Dave Sullivan indicated to you, our traffic engineer, that because it's in the zone of the influence of the traffic light, they have jurisdiction over that. We have Connecticut Transit. They're going to be a thing. And also the town of Rocky Hill is going to have to be an active participant in that conversation. We can't just do it on our own. I'm saying, though, as the applicant is, we're willing to spend the money and do those improvements and find out what the best pedestrian path can be. But once again, it's subject to a bunch of other people. So we're recommending that as a condition of approval, the applicant will install sidewalk connections, crosswalk, and then work around the bus stop. So as long as it receives DOT and other necessary approvals, and we're really trying to put a time clock on that of 90 days of making the request. What we don't want to find out is, we're being hung up for 18 months on that. So I think kind of cleaning up that area not only benefits the town, but also benefits ourselves. And frankly, if we get that sidewalk connection along Pratt, it may actually be even more important. But we're more than willing to be a really active participant and actually physically do the work if we can get consensus from those other parties. There was a question about bike racks. The plans already include 3 bike rack locations. So we have a bike rack at the Pocket Park, we have a bike rack next to the mixed-use retail building, and we have a bike rack at the clubhouse. Somebody asked where the ADA access would be to the Pocket Park. That would be along the street frontage. As you know, the topography drops there and we have stairs, but the ADA access will be from Main Street frontage. There was a question about Pratt Street access. Pratt Street access is not proposed to be an emergency-only access. It is proposed to be a two-way access. Our calculations and our traffic analysis show that it's really going to function as a secondary access, as really we have 2 other locations on Main Street. And also we're confident with the work we're going to do with the DOT and do some improvements at the traffic signal. We think that's going to be your best location. But we do also believe that Pratt Street is important, especially, so yes, it will be used for emergency access, but it's not going to be a gated. It's going to be available for free flow. And our traffic analysis went with that approach. We didn't look at it differently. There was some discussion about parking. In part of your package, you have a very detailed parking study, and I'm going to be completely honest, that parking study was not done for you. That was done for the applicant. The applicant came to us very early in this process and said, we need to feel comfortable about the parking on this site, especially with the mixed-use component. That's always somewhat of a little bit of a delta. So we went ahead and if you look at our parking study, we really looked at 3 different elements and we blended those together. One, we looked at your parking calculations, what's going to be required for retail, what's going to be required for residential, what did that number come up? Second, we dug into the published data. So we have ITE, we have all these other published data that was once again allowed to give us another way to look at it. And the third way we went out at it, we actually physically went out there and did parking calcs. So we went to multiple multifamily, including a project that Bellefonte is just finishing up in Cromwell. And we went around. We basically, I think, Emily, I think we Sunday at midnight or something like that. We feel that is, everybody should be home at Sunday at midnight generally. So we find the studies have shown that's when the highest parking demand is there. So we actually went out at night, found out what the true parking demand was, regardless of what the zoning required. What are these units being parked at? And then we've actually have done this for many other multifamily projects. So we actually already had a library of data. So we really blended all those elements together, and we gave an opinion to our client as to what we thought was a suitable parking count. Now, that ended up being a valuable tool, and that's why we gave it to you for a commission. But we believe that my client is also comfortable now based upon the analysis, and that's why we provided to you. We're very comfortable with that. And we also have other resources out there. We obviously run a bus transit. We have walkability. That's not really played into it, so we think that potentially could even give us a little more buffer. There was a question about the MDC. I think Commissioner was right. We initially sent an early on, very early on, well before we started doing any real detailed. We actually had a meeting with MDC, but we thought it was important enough to get a confirmation on capacity, and that was for a different unit count. We have submitted a formal, more detailed analysis to the MDC, and that's being worked through. Once we get that, we have no objection to providing that to the town. I would say, from an engineering standpoint, the difference between 180 and the unit count that we're proposing now, the gallonages are not really that different. The greatest demand for these projects is actually fire flow, and the fire flow is the same whether it's one building or 20 buildings. So we don't think that is materially going to be different, but ultimately, once we do get the final, I actually saw an email where the MDC asked some very specific calculations or questions about like air handling units and something. So we're actively working with them, and we'll have no objection that as a condition of approval, once that final letter comes in. Actually, I think the town might be copied on it anyways when that comes in. Lighting. There was a gentleman on Pratt Street who spoke about lighting, clearly was an expert on that. We want to clarify a few things on that. We'll show you a graphic a little bit. So we really have two light focuses on this thing. Along Main Street, we are simply matching the town standard. Those are lights that your town engineer was able to actually give me the cut sheets on those lights, and we'll make it look like. So when you're going down in front of the development, it'll feel like the same light you're seeing there. Those actually, I end up understanding, are about 5,000 K temperature range. Interior of this site, we have a very similar looking light, but it's actually a more dramatic down light. It actually is a more efficient light and more of a full cutoff light than the town standard. So actually we have a much tighter light system in the back. We have light poles that vary. We vary them throughout, but the lights vary from 12 to 16 feet. Currently, the plan shows at a temperature of 4,000 K. We have the neighbor recommended or asked that we consider 3,000. The applicant has no problem going to 3,000. It's essentially the light cast. I think it's more of a yellow light versus a white light. So I think those comments were well taken. Where his property is, there's not really any buildings there, and I'll show you later that we have submitted a photometric plan. It was originally in your packet in there, so, and I'll bring it up in a minute, but we did submit a photometric plan to show that we're at 0-foot candles around the perimeter of the site. But once again, if the commission feels strongly that, or understands that they would like to have us go down to 3,000 K, we can easily do that. We have, between this meeting and that meeting, we've had tons of emails back and forth with the lighting. We don't actually prepare the lighting. We actually go to a lighting expert who does the photometric plan, and they were very helpful. And they're actually the ones who have specified the lights on the Main Street, so they're very familiar with the light fixtures that are before you. Fire truck access, we actually included in our original submission was and I'll show you in a second, we actually did include a fire truck turning movement around the entire site to show that we had great access. But if you look at this plan, it's really set up in a grid pattern, so it really provides excellent access. And then kind of picking up where Attorney Williams spoke, I've done a detailed review of, we have 3 staff review letters from you, one from the assistant planner dated November 24th. We have one from your town engineer dated December 2nd, and then we have one from your town planner dated December 10th. I've reviewed all those in detail, and as Attorney Williams indicated, I believe those to be minor technical issues, a lot of things. Frankly, there's a lot of things that would be incorporated into a building permit set when we go to that level of design. But I would tell, it's my professional opinion that none of those comments that I read would result in any really plan changes that you would see that we've presented to you. They tend to be technical and more of logistics and how are you going to build this project. But the plan we've presented to you and to neighbors, I tell you it's no different. So I can tell you this, is I can believe I can address all those as a condition of approval without making material changes to the plans. With that, let's see, I think I click over here, right? Okay. So I'm going to back up a little bit. So in part of your submission packet was a fire truck turning movement. This is your biggest vehicle. In Rocky Hill, we actually had it from working on a medical office building. So we can see is we really have got ourselves around. I think there was some question about building 3 and 4, but you can see we worked our way pretty well around the site and had that. And we typically do this really early in the project to make sure, because it is such an important thing, and because we had worked in Rocky Hill, we knew it was going to be a question. So it does allow, we have 24-foot roads throughout, so we have good circulation there. This is a copy of the photometric plan. So as you can see, we worked with Apex Lighting. They're a lighting expert, and as I said, they're actually the ones who actually have done and specified the lights on your town center. And it was great to work with them because they were able to pick a light interior to the site that really mimicked or matched theirs. So what this plan shows is, unfortunately, you got to get your reading glasses out, but all those little tick marks you see throughout this project are foot candles. So they basically put the lights into a model, they shine it down, and they're able to they are able to map basically the foot candles, and they move the lights around and tell us where to put the lights. So we don't have hot spots where it's lighting up at a very heavy level, and then we don't have dark spots. And what I tried to do on this is I asked my staff to draw if you look at that dotted blue line around the entire perimeter, that's basically connecting the 0-foot candle points. So as you can see, we basically go around. The only area where we're extending really substantially into the thing is actually the streetscape, because we're doing lights and we're trying to light up Main Street. But we worked closely with Apex, and we believe we put together a lighting plan that is very respectful to neighbors and keeps the lights onto our property. As we walk through, the other thing is there was questions both from town staff and from this commission about view sheds and what this project would look like. And obviously we had a quick turnaround here, but we're going to walk you through some images that I think should be helpful to this commission. So this is simply the same rendering that this commission saw last meeting. Once again, some of these things in the slide deck we put in considering that this commission may want to go back again. This is just a rendering of the same rendering that you saw before. It's the mixed use, the retail with the plaza in front. This is what we call as the pocket park, which is on the far end of the site. Once again, same exact rendering. So I think there was a question about what is the streetscape feel? What would we see when we go down the street, and what are some of the imagery? So if you can see here, there's 3 images here. First image on your upper left is the pocket park. As you can see, we have, there is and actually it's hard to represent. The Main Street actually has a paved shoulder there, so it's a little bit more offset. The cars are not going right on the curb. There's a paved shoulder there. But this is really the approach. So we have a green belt where we're putting trees. We then have a sidewalk, and it's your town detail, that it basically has a sidewalk with a banding of pavers on the side, or the red pavers. And then we have another green belt, and then the building. So in the upper left, that gives you a sense of you're coming southbound, and you're greeted with the pocket park. That's kind of a rendering of what you would feel. You can see the lights in the foreground on our side of the sidewalk. Then we're moving down the sidewalk a little bit more. That would give you a sense as to what we expect the streetscape to look like. And then on the lower picture is really, once again, you're out on the sidewalk and you're approaching the retail building. Right off to the right here is the existing office building. Off to the left is our main drive at the traffic light. So once again, it was a really an opportunity to give this commission a feel as to what we expect that ground level feel to look like. And I know it's hard to do it before, but hopefully these things give you a little better feel of what we're proposing. So here's the next step. So there was a question about what are the neighbors going to see, and obviously in 2021 there's some real cool models out there, and we can put some things together. So the way this was created was we took James's 3D model of his site and built the buildings, and we used Google Earth to kind of put together this model. So I would have to say it's substantially accurate, but not completely perfect, knowing that we really had to turn this around in 2 weeks. But I think this really gives a good perspective about what you're going to see. So, and I want to walk through these slowly so the commission has a chance to look at them. But obviously we're well, just far left of the building is Town Hall, so we're looking down Main Street, and we're looking at the development, and that gives you a sense into landscape. You can see our neighbors of the condos, you can see the CVS across the street, and you can see those buildings. Probably the most important ones are those buildings that are fronting Main Street, and I think you can see how that proximity to the sidewalk is pretty consistent with the rendering we just showed you. And then you can see that third building, which is the mixed-use building, is stepped back a little bit farther, and that's part of that is to get that retail plaza or that outdoor plaza in front of it. This is just simply, so when we create this model, we're able to cut views. And I think Miss Ritchie even asked for some views coming from Pratt Street and then coming from some condos to the rear. So we cut some views on those, and we'll walk you through it. So this is just showing the view orientations. So if I walk you through, and we can go back and forth. So let's look at number one. So number one is at the top of the plan. There's residential properties over there, and what the view shed would look like as they look into the property. And I'm sorry, going back here. So number one is the upper left. So you can see we're kind of hovering over those residential properties. There is a fairly large wooded area or a tree line along the back their properties, and you're really seeing into. So once again, this is a high view shed, right? We're not standing on the ground. We're it's almost like a drone view. You're pretty far up in the sky. Number two is really where our entry drive is coming out into Pratt Street. So you can see that's the center one. You can see the red, I think it's a little red cape there. And you can see there's trees surrounded there, and that's kind of, once again, that's the view you're looking into there. Go back again. So 3 is more looking across. We're looking towards the town green there, and you can see you see the cemetery, and we're kind of looking down there. Number 4 is at the traffic light, looking straight across. So if you look at number 4, you'll see CVS just over in the right-hand side. I believe that's CVS. You're looking right at our traffic signal. One thing you notice in this model is we did not build landscaping into the model. We just, that's not there. This is just buildings and green space and roads. Number 5, I guess I don't have to flip back. Number 5 is just a similar view to what we showed before. It's coming down Main Street and showing the buildings. And then this was a view that was requested. So number 6, we have some condos that are located to the rear. What's that view shed going to look like? and that's the far right one. You can see the what it looks to be brown or red roofed condos down there. Luckily, there's there's a substantial vegetated buffer there that is going to stay intact. And then we took a closer look at some of these views that the neighbors approached us with. So number one is, once again, we're at those residential homes to the rear of us, and we're looking over it. So this was a before and after, because I drove out this weekend, this week, and I was surprised about how Ames to Main Street presents itself as a fairly low building, but if you drive around the back, the building is quite large. So on the left is the view we expect the neighbors would see. You can see in the foreground is the lower part of the Ames, and then the Ames building that pops up an additional 3 stories on the right. And then so that's the before. On the right is the after. As you can see, the buildings are substantially lower, and the massing of those is less. Same thing on the ones below there. Once again, we have that the red cape on Pratt Street, which is directly adjacent to our driveway. So we have, as you can see in the foreground, is the Ames building, the low part and the tall part, and then we built a model in showing the remaining portion of the building. And you can see in the foreground, that's the tallest building in the back. That's the building that Joe spoke about, the one that has the building height relief on. And as you can see, we put lower, more 2-story and the shallower buildings on as adjacent to the neighbors. Once again, a before and after. So once again, we're kind of looking north, and you're looking over the cemetery. Right now, you're viewing the Ames building on the left. On the right is what we would anticipate, if you were a bird and you were flying up in the sky, what you would see. Same thing before and after coming out at the main entrance drive. We have the view is looking into the Ames building to the right is what we expect to see. You'll see the retail building on the right of that one, and then the buildings that front the main street are on the left there. Once again, before and after. We think these side-by-sides hopefully are helpful to the commission. Once again, we're looking southbound on Main Street. You see the Ames building and then the new building. And then this was an important view that I think was looked for, is I think, are they called Candlewood Condos?
Oh, Cedar Hollow.
Cedar Hollow, sorry. Cedar Hollow, this was requested, a view of this. So behind Cedar Hollow is actually the tallest point of the Ames building. So you can see this one's a pretty important view. So they really have the biggest tallest building there. And you can see the massing of our buildings is much smaller and actually pushed away from them on there. Because we actually, on these side, on flanking them is just garages, 1-story garages. With that, that concludes my presentation. I'm not going away. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions later on. But at this point, it's Mark Forlenza is going to come up. Thank you.
Good evening again, Commission. My name is Mark Forlenza, and I guess for lack of a better description, I will be in charge of both the development and construction of this community if you approve it. I wanted to do a couple of things tonight, and mainly there was a lot of comments about both the amount of retail as a percentage of total square footage on the community, and then also the location of the retail itself. So I just wanted to briefly address that, sort of piggybacking on what our appraiser and our Benedict did with respect to you have to create sort of the right balance. First, just a little history of how we got to the plan. When we first looked at the zoning reg, I think both you and the staff should be commended for not actually designating a percentage of retail or residential, or what I like to call residential and sort of non-residential uses. The world and the environment is changing, and it allows us to have sort of a discussion on why we're proposing these percentages and to try to convince you that what we're proposing does strike the right balance. So first, I'd like to commend you on not sort of legislating that and let us having this open discussion on it. When we first looked at the regs, we had a quite different plan that had substantially less non-residential uses. After many meetings back and forth, we were strongly encouraged, thankfully by staff, to sort of add some more retail and residential to get it up to the percentages that we have now. And we're comfortable in presenting this to you, and we're comfortable that we can develop it and build it and successfully and have a successful development that's financeable. Sort of to show you that the percentages that we're presenting to you are sort of in line with what is happening in Connecticut. I looked at a couple of, well, first, let me just tell you exactly what we're doing. Our total net square footage is approximately 241,000, of which 19,500 is sort of non-resi uses. About half is retail and about half is office. That percent, and one of the commission members said 10%, but that percent is actually 8% of the total square footage. So 8% of the total square footage is non-residential uses. I went back and looked at some of the developments that are happening right now in both New Haven and Norwalk, the ones that I was familiar with. And our percentages are substantially higher for a lot of good reasons. At the Audubon, I don't know if anyone is familiar with the Audubon in New Haven, their percentages of non-residential uses is about 3.7%. The WIT, which is on Worcester in downtown New Haven, is 2% of non-resi to residential. Toll Brothers down in Norwalk, similar community of a couple 100,000 square feet, has a non-residential percent of about 6%. And I guess what we're saying to you is we're sort of in line with what other developers are doing with these mixed-use communities, and there's reasons for that. The environment for retail is very challenging in Connecticut, and we have to try to get to a proper balance between both resi and non-resi, and I think we've sort of achieved that there. The 8%, I think, is more than what most people are providing in a suburban town, not in an urban town, where retail in an urban town is often more desirable and easier to lease than a suburban town. So that's sort of our rationale for providing the 8%. With respect to the location of the retail, why we picked the building that's sort of half on Main Street and half on Division, sort of on that angle, there were good reasons for that. The first is that building itself has its own access drive. So people coming in can just use that secondary access off Division to get to the retail, which potentially could be a restaurant or cafe or something like that. The second reason we chose that is because our two-story office building, which is if you're looking at the plan all the way to the right of the site, is also there, and there's synergies in parking. Tom took you through the parking studies that we've done, and what happens when you mix uses together, some uses are complementary to each other and some aren't. An office use is very complementary to a retail and residential, so that's why we sort of put the retail in that location, which then allows us, as you can see on the right side of the site, there's a pretty large parking area. It's probably the largest parking area we have. That's to accommodate the retail, and we also are sharing some spots with the office. Because on the weekend, when the office folks are not there, those spaces become available for retail. So that's sort of why we put it on that side of the site also. And lastly, the way we've got this oriented, and there were some questions about the viability of this, it allows us to put the parking in back of the retail. And it's not so great that the sort of the national chains won't come. What we expect to have here are retailers that'll enhance both our resident lives, and also the town residents' lives. Something that's sort of complementary to what our use is, and we're going to be very specific and very critiquing the tenants that actually go into these buildings. So that's another reason why we think it's an appropriate match, appropriate balance. And I think that closes my comments. If there's any questions, I know this is one of the bigger issues with this commission. If there's any other questions, I can take them now. We can wait towards the end.
Yeah, why don't we wait until presentation is done?
See if we can test. Okay, it is working. All right. So one of the things we have been asked from the commission as well as from the third party is to provide some of the vignettes and the storyboards. And one of the things they wanted to see, this out real quick. Carry this on the plane. Was some of the brick samples and some of the products that we're using. So let me go and move this slide a little bit forward here. Yeah. So this is our material board that we refined. So one of the questions that was asked specifically was, how does our product or the project that we're looking at complement Rocky Hill? So anybody who knows in Rocky Hill, there's really not, from what we could gather, there's not a comparable product type or project in Rocky Hill that's trying to do what we're trying to do at this point. So what we tried to do was we attempted to, we attempted to use the city town hall as kind of our basis, which is what that brick is drawn from. So that particular brick, there's two brick colors that are included in the town city. There's some of the older and some of the newer. So the intention is that is kind of a blend of those two, which is why that particular brick was selected. So we have obviously in the, we're going to have storefront. That's the brick is what you're seeing here. Obviously mortar color could change, but we would have our siding, we would have our details for the windows, and then you'd obviously have storefront areas at the retail areas. This is another item that we've seen. This is a slide we've seen before. This is where we were talking about, I know Tom had mentioned earlier about the two lights. The light on Main Street, that matches your current fixture that highlights that area. And then the interior light, that's that full cutoff fixture that provides a little bit more distributed light to provide more of a universal type coverage. So one thing, let me pull this up here. Give me 1 second. Get out of this. I'm going to bring up, the other thing that was discussed was the elevations. So as you're looking at the elevations here, and I'm going to go down the sheet here, we went through the main building that we were concerned with or we discussed was building number 7. So building number 7, and next page. Sorry, computer's chugging on the file. Okay, so building number 7 is what we call a 3-4 split. So there's a 3-story side and a 4-story side. We utilize this for several reasons. First of all, obviously there's natural topo that's in the site that we're trying to utilize to assist with the drainage. Drainage, obviously, the current site is a huge problem, one that we're tending to resolve both with increased flow as well as redoing the system and properly maintaining it going forward.
Are you looking at a slide?
See your
'Cause we-
desktop.
Sorry, forgot that I wasn't doing a PowerPoint. Let me slide it over there. Oh, there we go. My bad. So this is that particular elevation, and this is where the one that we're asking for the 1.5 foot increase. So as you can see in the center, we provided this vaulted area, or basically it's a raised gable to allow us to articulate this building from an elevational standpoint. That's basically, if you look at this point here, that's where our median is being derived from, is from the midpoint of this upper and where our truss bearing point is. That's where our height is coming, and that's where we're getting the 46 feet, call it 46 feet, 6 inches. We feel that from an architectural design standpoint, this particular elevation is much more efficient and much more aesthetically pleasing, in addition to the fact that this gives us the opportunity to provide a different unit type at this particular level with some lofts, which we think would be a good selling point for especially people who are teleworking or working at home. So this is the only elevation, and this is where you're seeing that 4-story side. And then what we did is in the letter that I sent, basically I outlined what our elevations are. This coincides with this graphic in this presentation that you have in front of you. I think that's what I've got. Let me turn this up. I'm going to put the slideshow back up. In case anybody needs to look at it. Turn that off. There we go. Minimize.
Mr. Chair, I had a quick question on the elevation.
I think we can,
At the end,
at the end.
Okay.
Attorney Joe Williams again. I just had one last thing to add, Mr. Chairman, that we wanted to include, and that is responding to some questions we had last time about public access to amenities in the development. We've shown you in some detail and some nice renderings what we're calling the pocket park at the front corner of the building, and my clients authorized me and would be prepared to donate that park to the town of Rocky Hill, subject to, we just need to do a final detailed design review and make sure that if we actually convey that park area and take it off our plan, that it doesn't create any zoning compliance issues with regard to setbacks, coverage, and the like. We don't think it will. So I'll just make that small caveat. We want to make that final confirmation, but we thought that would be hopefully a good way for the town to know that it's a public property that the public has access and is invited to enjoy. With that, that's our response presentation. We thank you, and we'll reserve the right, of course, to respond any further to anything else that comes up tonight, and we're happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I will open up the
Yeah.
comment section to
Okay,
the
let me
people.
go get the
Okay.
list. Okay.
Do you want to leave the screen up or down for public?
Yeah, I think we should.
Do wanna
Can you
leave it
put
up?
the spring? Yeah.
No, I'm asking, do you want to leave it up or in case there's...
Everyone's gonna use that.
I think it's better out.
2 benches.
They can just
I
talk.
like seeing you, Alan. I want the lights on.
You want the light to shine off my head?
Trust me, I'm there too.
Not yet.
Oh, yeah.
All right, now we'll open up the portion of this public hearing for public comment, and we have public speakers identified. So
Okay.
Kim, you wanna-
I do have 4 people that are on the list. There are some other sheets in the back of the room. First on the list, Barry Goldberg, 181 Hunters Lane, Newington.
Jerry Goldberg, 181 Hunters Lane, Newington. I'd like to give some write-ups that I've done. Chair,
Thank you.
take it distributed to the board.
Yep.
I don't anticipate 3 minutes, so you don't have to worry about cutting me off, I hope. Unfinished business. I'd like to apologize to the commission. At the last public hearing, I made reference to a term called predetermination. I was wrong, and I apologize to that remark. Okay. As for the items that I've written out, I'll just go quickly through some of them. The key to the presentation I'm going to make is that they're under review here under special permit. And when we wrote the regulations, we specifically didn't legislate the percentages of residential and retail offices. We did that so that we would have the opportunity to make the proper mix, because we felt that if we did a mix type of development, it would be good for the community. If one suffers, another part would prosper. So that right now, retail office is suffering, housing is very strong. But we're looking to the future, retail and office is going to come back at some time, and then who knows if residential is going to suffer. So the burden seems to be on this commission that because residential is important right now and that's thriving, we should forget about retail and office to the point that the developer is representing that they're going to put 8% in. That wasn't the intent of this commission and the regulations we wrote. We wanted a blend so that 25 years from now, when housing is not as strong as it is right now, and retail and office starts to happen, we got a community that's viable because we're not putting, per se, eggs in the basket. So we have to look toward the future. Right now, we're looking at this moment in time, and the developer's got a problem. He's got retail and office, which he can't get to be developed. Well, that is not the commission's problem. You represent the, I'm not looking, I apologize if I'm talking into a type of terminology that may not be well receptive, but the point I'm getting or trying to get to is that we're looking as a zoning commission to the future. You won't be here 25 years, probably. What's going to happen 25 years down the road with this development? So you want a good blend. Now, special permit, the way we wrote it, gives you the opportunity what you think would be in the best interest of Rocky Hill, not in the best interest of the developer. That's key to a point that I can't strive enough, and I made at the last meeting. Now, a couple issues that that were brought up about school children. I wrote in this report here the components of school children and what it comprises to the town of Rocky Hill. I have the complete budget for the Board of Education for 2021 to 2022. I have the manual. It's a large book of the whole financial structure of the Board of Education and the education system of Rocky Hill. But this synopsis that I wrote will give you an insight as to where, when people talk about school children and what it represents to a residential development, item number 4 should give you some insight as to what I was trying to determine. Now, affordable housing, we wrote into the regulations 10%. You've done it so that it's a deed restriction. Great. It's a good start. But what does it go to the next step? How do you tell the developer that the 10% is affordable housing and that you're going to hold them accountable to that? And where's the basic and rules and legislative language that's going to give you an insight as to what you determine the affordable housing that the 10% should be? How is that going to be enforced? I believe there should be a contract with the Board of Education or the town of Rocky Hill as to how that's going to be done. Now, at the last hearing, the developer says he hasn't determined where the affordable housing is going to be. He's going to have units. So they may vacillate throughout the development there. It will be here one day and it'll be there another day. So there isn't clear guidelines and direction as to what that affordable housing is going to be. If he can't get an individual to take that affordable housing for that specific point in time, is he going to rent it out at full market value? I'm not so sure what deed restriction or deed compliance, what that means. You should have language that gives you a better insight as to what that affordable housing means and how it's going to be handled, and a reporting type of
I think you're coming up.
that you would say. I know.
Yep.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just ask a quick question in between.
I'm just going to pass, there were extra copies. I'm going to pass a copy on to the applicant's attorney.
Just to consider a different approach, it's of course your call, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm just wondering if, given that there's not a lot of people signed up, would you like us to respond after each person speaks to try
No.
to get them done?
I think let's
Okay.
finish up everyone, and then you can combine questions too, because
Otherwise, you have a problem.
Sorry. Next on the list is Ed Ciccarello, 40 Riverview Road, Rocky Hill.
Thank you. Ed Ciccarello, 40 Riverview Road. I want to compliment the developer for coming in and doing a really good job. And answering the questions that you had asked them. So my hat goes off to you. I won't take it off. Last time I spoke, I mentioned the name. I still see the words Town Center on there, and I want to hear it from the developer that the name is going to change. Call it 2418. Call it across from the Oak. Call it across from the Green. But to me, the word Town Center is just not the connotation. I asked the last time about public versus private, and I'd like them to answer that as well. There's a labyrinth. There's a dog run. Can I walk in there as a public person and use those? It's great to hear sidewalks on Pratt Street. I hope you capitalized on that. I hope you take them up on the offer, because you know as a goal we want to connect to the river. They said it. You know it. I know it. We all know it. So let's take them up on the offer and make this the first sidewalk on Pratt, and let's get down to the river, because that's been our goal for about 20 years. I would ask the developer if they have done any research in sustainability as far as energy is concerned. Are we going to put any solar panels up there? And lastly, two more things. The pocket park and the conveyance is a great gesture, and I appreciate that. My concern is that now, does the town maintain that, or does the Belfonte maintain that? Because if we have to maintain it, that means that our staff has to do more work. Two more things, if I may. The State Preservation Office, Historic Preservation Office, said it was not, that site itself was not historically significant. I just want to mention that you are surrounded by significant historic landscape. You have the Historic Center Cemetery. You have across the street our Memorial Veterans Green. The tree that's on it is called the Constitution Oak, which was put there in 1919. The Elm Street Historic District is on Elm. The Glastonbury, or the Rocky Hill Center Historic District is on Glastonbury Avenue. And lastly, I measured, this is the most important to me, because I walk past that Ames property a lot, and when the cars come by, you have right now literally 3 feet of grass between the road and the sidewalk. I measured it. I literally went out today and I measured it. It's 3 feet. I don't see any difference between that, their plan now. I measured the community center in front of our brand new community center, 16 feet between the road and the sidewalk. There's grass there. It's a buffer. I measured the Silestine streetscape, 18 feet. So we need a buffer there. Don't let this go without that. Listen, I think it's a great project. I would vote for it, but we need to really revise it and get what we want. Okay? So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Peter Parada, 2433 Main Street, Rocky Hill.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Just briefly, I submitted a letter today, and Ms. Rickey is going to read it publicly, so I won't go into that. Is that correct?
It is on the table this evening. So.
To read? Because I won't read it if you're going to read it.
No, yeah, there is no need to read. You can summarize. We have it in our...
So are you going to read it, or you want me to read my letter?
He can read it?
Okay,
or
you can read it. That's fine.
One or the other.
You can read it.
Shit.
One
or the other. I'd rather have you read it. You're better at it than I am. So, yes?
You can go ahead.
Okay. Now I need my glasses, which are...
See, I was testing you. You can have it.
Yep. 3 minutes are gone. 2:45.
I came last time, and thank you for allowing the public hearing to continue. I just have some quick questions regarding the presentation today, just for clarification points, and then I'll read my letter. I kind of heard that they're looking, and I'm not sure about this, variances for parking, setbacks, and height, and I'm not sure if that's true or not, but if so, then maybe you need to clarify whether that's true or not. But in my letter, I wasn't expecting to be here. That's why I sent it. So, Kim, thank you for doing that. So I'm just going to read it. I appreciate the opportunity to submit my comments in writing. Please read them at the hearing. As a owner of a multifamily unit in one of the first mixed units buildings in Rocky Hill, I support the smart development, but I'm concerned about the proposed town center plan. I care deeply about Rocky Hill, as it endured my extensive experience in town affairs. I'm a 30-year resident, owner of 2 businesses in Rocky Hill for over 27 years. In fact, when a storm knocked out the power in Rocky Hill, my tennis club provided showers, power, and places for people to call and use their phones to call their loved ones. So I care about this town. I served 2 terms as Economic Commissioner, Commission Chairperson, which led to the first strategic plan of Rocky Hill, some tax incentives for business development, and an increase in business tax base, which is all important. I also served 2 terms as a member of the chairperson of Public Building Committee, as well as Board of Education, and finally as the president of the Chamber of Commerce, supporting business in Rocky Hill while directing the Memorial Day Parade for over 10 years. It is because of my dedication to Rocky Hill that I am sharing with you my concerns about this development. What is the Village Town Center? For 20 years and currently, it was supposed to be a special project for the residents of Rocky Hill. I appreciate the developer wanting to build an apartment complex in our town center. However, the plan submitted does not in any way support and define the intent of the village development concept for the following reasons. 1, the proposed development has an apartment density which is far too high and far too little retail and business space, which is not even on Main Street. It is therefore not a true mixed-use development, which is supposed to be the core concept of this center. Another reason for increase in commercial and decrease in residential is to maximize the financial benefits to the town, lower the amount spent on education, new children, which we discussed today. Setbacks, as was mentioned, again, I agree, 15 to 20 feet seems to be the norm for anything new being built in Rocky Hill. The architecture does not in any way represent the town of Rocky Hill, which the gentleman stated. Most of the developments are 2-story, low-key design. It was mentioned shared parking. That rarely works. That's why I asked the question of really what is required and what are they proposing. Parking is always at a premium in any apartment complex. I know, I own several of them, and there's always an issue. Crosswalks was addressed. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you working on that. I would also like to provide some suggestions for the commission and the developer to consider. 1, require a true mix concept based on an appropriate percentage, which was the intent. I think Barry mentioned that, so I don't want to reiterate that. Require a design that's compatible with Rocky Hill. Require a peer review of the project, okay, to go over the legalities of what's going on. I would also like to require that the retail space be located on Main Street under the apartments, not further north on towards Pratt Street. And I would also like to increase the open space with access to the public, which is really one of the main reasons why we called it a town center to begin with. I'll skip the technical questions, the technical comments which we can add, but in general, during the public hearing, you know, to be difficult to have a substantial amount of retail and office is very difficult in this time frame, and I know. And one of the key components and recommendations for this site is from your perspective, is to encourage and support the zoning regulations established in a mixed use pedestrian-friendly town center, a sense of a place. So thank you, and please consider my comments. I do want the smart development. Believe me, after 20, 30 years looking across the street, I'm thrilled something's going there. I just hope that the developer will consider looking at some modifications that would benefit everyone. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
John Chudzik, 14 Pratt Street, Rocky Hill.
Good evening, John Chudzik, 14 Pratt Street. I asked about the demo last time, and I'd like to get a copy of the demo plan. I was just wondering who would be reviewing that plan, reviewing the samples, the data that comes back, who's going to make sure that the hazardous waste has been removed. Is staff going to be doing that, or is the contractor and the owner going to be doing it? Second comment I had was the secondary access off Pratt Street. Anyone who's going to come up from the south, I lived here all my life, 60 years. I lived on the Solstein Highway for 16 of those years. Anyone who's coming from like the Cromwell area, they're not going to come down to the main entrance. They're going to cut down Pratt Street. And they're going to go up to that secondary entrance because they're going to bypass all the stuff that they have to go in front of. And that street already is a very busy street. We have two condo complexes down at the end, and I really don't need more traffic coming down my street. The sidewalk, it's a great idea, you guys, but I don't want it on my side. That's what the side it would be. I already have electrical poles. My property has a good elevation difference from the street. I think if they do it, it would be the other side of the street would be a better place, more open. My third question was the building in the back. I think it's building 8, maybe. I asked if there's any way that could be relocated towards the north and put the meditation garden on the other side, which would be on my side. My concerns are, like I said last time, 18 years, I've been there for 25 in that house. 18 years, I had no neighbors. Now I'm going to have 500 neighbors. And I'm going to have a 4-story, I just seen this new one tonight, with the loft, that's going to be looking down into my yard. And I'd like to keep privacy as much as I could. And moving that building over, I don't see it being a hardship. I mean, the sewage will be running down to the pump station. It'd be a shorter run for that. Everything else would be same, just move it around. That didn't get addressed, and I'd like to see if that could be addressed. And that's about it. Oh, there's one other thing. I have on the back part by that building, there's 6, 7 large white pines that give me a nice screen. I'm hoping that doesn't get removed when they do the cleanup and landscaping. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no other names on the sheet of paper I have. I don't know if there are other people that wish to speak.
Is there anyone who would like to address to the commission? Yes.
Thank you again. Barry Goldberg, 181 Hunters Lane, Newington. I'm really taken back by the remark about retail. I believe the statement was retail space would hurt existing retail market in the town of Rocky Hill. That is the most ridiculous statement I've heard. I've been in retail for over 40 years. I've built stores, retail stores throughout the United States. I've reviewed market surveys, thousands of them before we build a retail store. I've done 2 businesses with retail stores. And one of the premises about retail is that you want to go in a market that has already established some retail similar to what you have and would augment that, so that you wouldn't hurt existing retail. You would trade off on retail and they would trade off on you, so it would complement each other. For an example, a Lucky Brand store, jeans in Rocky Hill, perfect. Coach store, Polo store. You're telling me that these high-end or even other retailers of similar type would hurt retail in Rocky Hill. I would like to see this report from Bennett to understand his terminology and his philosophy, but being in retail for over 40 years and building retail stores and looking at market surveys, where to put retail stores, that was my livelihood. And we did a very, we ran 3 successful businesses by where we established retail. We know that the mall business is down, and that's struggling, but strip centers and local village type of areas like Evergreen Walk, like Blueback Square, those are thriving. You know, there are vacancies because for one type or another, there's issues with the retail and how they interpret that market. But retail is thriving. You just have to know what you're doing.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to address to the commission? Anyone else? 1, 2, 3. All
I
right.
do have some correspondence
Yep.
that we received. There was an email from Stephen Slattery dated today at 4:29 p.m. Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Slattery. I live at 330 Old Main Street here in Rocky Hill. I am writing to submit comments in support of proposed development by Belfonte Companies at the site of the Ames building. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend the meeting tonight and ask this email be read into the record. I support the proposal because I think that it is well thought out and a respectful design that takes into consideration the many factors inherent in development on that site. I attended the last meeting and gave comments in support of the proposal. Since then, I've been thinking about a lot of the criticisms I heard of the proposal at the last meeting. I think that those criticisms are misguided. First, the proposal was criticized in general for not creating enough public use. People commented that they can't just go in and use the pool or other amenities, and that is correct. What a percentage of these critics seem to ignore is that at the end of the day, this is privately owned piece of property. Property has not been donated to the town. This is not a hearing on what to do with town-owned property where we could really fight over what to do with property, including more community-based recreational uses. Of course, my glasses are fogging up, I apologize. Of course, although it is a piece of privately owned property, it does occupy an area in the village district, so the developers have to comply with the various restrictions for that property in the district. In my opinion, this proposal was undertaken with a great deal of care and respect for the vision of Rocky Hill as expressed in the village district restrictions. It is a balance between allowing the private property owner to develop a successful piece of property for the overall betterment of Rocky Hill while taking into account the concerns of the village district restrictions are meant to address. In this sense, the proposal creates a nice balance between the private-public considerations for the development of a piece of property located in this district. Second criticism voiced at the last meeting was that the proposal did not include enough commercial use. To this, I would suggest that there is enough empty commercial property along Celestine already. What I don't want to see is the development of a beautiful-looking commercial property that will remain vacant once built. I think this proposal has attempted to strike a balance of commercial, residential use as well. In the end, my overall take on this proposal is that it was done with great care and respect for the town of Rocky Hill. It does a great job of acting as a buffer of sorts between the predominantly residential areas on one side and the predominantly commercial areas on the other side. We must not lose sight of the fact that this property is ultimately privately owned. Ideas of majority public use are just simply not realistic, and objections based upon such, I think, misguide the board. This proposal strikes a nice balance between the residential, commercial considerations to be had, as well as between the private-public considerations as promulgated in the village district restrictions. I support the proposal. We have an email from Valerie Triblets to Belden Lane, received December 15th, 5:34 p.m. Hi, Kim. Although I think this is a lovely development, I believe it falls very short of the intention of a town center and the vision of a mixed-use development offering walking space, restaurants, and businesses. This development does not offer the citizens of the area any real benefits other than filling up an empty eyesore. Without any other options on the table and the passage of so much time, I imagine there is little interest in waiting for an opportunity or creating an opportunity which would truly turn the east side of town into a hub of activity and a place for all of us to shop, work, walk, bike, and enjoy. Other than the town purchasing the property and creating a walkable neighborhood, developers are forced to follow the market, which is not favorable for retail or restaurant development right now. In the years to come, this will be looked upon as a turning point for the riverfront community. I think putting this very large apartment complex is a mistake, but without other options, I understand the need to move ahead. Another email received today, December 15th, 2:09 p.m. from Candace Stibe. Dear Ms. Ritchie, as I watched the public hearing from December 1, and I understand it's been continued to this evening, December 15, 2021, I own property at 37 Ashwell Avenue and have been a resident since my childhood, with the exception of 15 years in Glastonbury. While I'm excited to see the Ames property finally being developed, I have some concerns on these plans by the Belfonte Company. It is very heavy on the residential side, with multiple buildings only containing apartments. I drive through that area of Main Street daily, and the traffic is heavy already. The split intersection has become increasingly difficult. I question if retail is added to this area, it will make it too congested. I have lived off Hebron Avenue in Glastonbury, and that became a traffic nightmare because of the dense mixed-use developments. The original renderings show retail on the street level of multiple buildings. Clearly, those plans have changed. The retail seems to be in a separate building with the potential of being empty if it cannot be rented. I agree with many residents that this is a private property. Most of the amenities would be for the residents. Therefore, the village center motif, while attractive, would not benefit the neighbors except for the increased traffic and more children in our already crowded schools. How is this being built? In phases? What would the timeline be? Would there be guarantees by the developer to bring the entire project to completion? Usually, the residential buildings are completed before the retail space. This is a huge project, and it would seem to be years away from the complete project. I'm in favor of developing this property. I ask that the commission be thorough and transparent with the residents of Rocky Hill to get the best results from this project and to continue to make Main Street attractive to everyone. We also have on the table, and there's a lot of numbers in this report, so I will not read them, but there is I can certainly send it out to whomever in the audience wants it, and to the developer as well. We received December 10th, 9:23 a.m. from Raymond Carpentino, and an addendum yesterday, Tuesday, December 14th at 3:09 p.m. It was on school-age children, school impact, and numbers, and the commission has it on their table. Yep.
Is that all?
That's it.
So before we get into open up the question for commission, can I have a motion for a little break?
Motion for a 5-minute recess.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
5 minutes usually becomes half an hour.
Kim. We'll start,
The lawyers.
yeah, I don't know where.
Oh, wait, Kim's not here?
Yeah, it's,
And we're not gonna be asking her questions, we're asking them.
no, but she has to,
She needs to
she
officiate.
has to.
She has to
make sure-
officiate.
We can turn it on.
They're still not here. Only Kim's here, but their team's not here.
All right, thank you.
We will continue with the public hearing. I think, Kim, do you want to enter this as for the record?
Yes.
Thank you.
You should talk about.
Yes. And before we start, Commissioner Guy Drapo had to leave. So, Commissioner Aglico would be seated.
So you took track of the time when we took a break?
That's what you want.
Yep. I'll just, okay.
Let's move along.
I was informed that I had received another email. I received it on a Saturday, so I didn't see this email. But I also handed the applicant a copy as well. It is from Charles Wisnowski, 670 Old Main Street. It was received Saturday, December 11, 2021 at 11:51 a.m. Please forward these comments to commission members. In my opinion, the height and mass of the buildings along the west side of the site, buildings 2 and 6, are too tall and too close to the Main Street property line. Proposed resolution: eliminate the top floor of these two buildings. The preliminary discussion with the P&Z Commission had 202 units, not the present 213. And or 1, reverse the parking from behind the east side to the Main Street side. 2, make the clubhouse the first floor of a residential building, changing building 1 to a mixed-use multi-story. 3, where the garage building footprints are as G6R, convert that use to townhouses with or without garages below. These are lots of places where the regulations give the commission discretion, including 9D, special permit application. 9D1, purpose. The purpose of a special permit application is to review the appropriateness of certain uses or activities in a specific location or configuration in order to evaluate overall impacts of the specific application, ensure compliance with these regulations, and promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. As a 40-year resident of the neighborhood, former member of the P&Z Commission, former commercial real estate appraiser for 45 years, and the present plan to create a canyon wall of 4 stories plus pitch roof 6 feet from the street line in a historical neighborhood is not in compliance with the general welfare of the community. Since the developer will benefit from the action of transferring some of my income taxes from the state, requiring an appropriate configuration of the proposed design is further emphasized. I also ask the Commission to wait for Glenn Childers' final report.
Thank you. Now I'll open up questions for the commissioners. Commissioner Glico?
This is for staff. Just want to confirm that the abutter on tab 15 were notified.
The abutters on,
Tab 15, because one of the speakers last time stated that he did not receive notification.
okay, I believe that was Mr. Peter Parada, and he did, per the list that we received that's in the file, the business entity at 2433 did receive notification or was sent notification, and by virtue of the fact that the individual was at the public hearing, that qualifies as receiving notification.
Thank you. Just want it on record. I do have a question for applicant. The office space is a two-story building. Has there been any discussion on making that a one-story building with residential above and moving the square footage to another portion of one of the other buildings that's on Main? Meaning like building 2 or 6.
Yeah, Mark Forlenza, I've been before the commission before. We really haven't considered making that two-story building a one-story building. And changing it to retail, is that what you're saying? Or
No, not retail. I stated moving the office space, because that building is dedicated as office space, not
Correct.
retail. So say you move that office space to another portion and making that building into a mixed use.
we haven't considered that. It does impact the layout quite a bit with the parking doing that, but we haven't really considered that.
What would be the hardship in building out building 2 and 6 with the potential of having retail on the bottom?
Can we pull up the site plan? Do you mind, so we can talk to it?
I think we'll need
Yep.
I guess my question is, in reference to the construction aspect and design, is there a huge hardship?
Okay, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, it is, and I'll tell you why. When you're building a mixed-use building, and I didn't really get into this during my presentation, the construction type is different. In that building that we are providing retail the first floor requires large spans to accommodate the retail. Typically, that can be done in structural steel or precast or cast-in-place concrete to create the spans that you need for tenants moving in and out. That cost on that one building could be up to $1 million extra just to provide retail there, which is another reason why when you say to me, can you add additional retail, it's not just the market is not there, which it's not. The cost goes up exponentially to build these buildings. So I understand what you're saying. You're saying, why can't you just try to build building 2 and 6 out of retail? And then if you can't get the retail, it's just convert it to residential. It adds enormous amounts of money to that, and the design is just not, you just don't want to design the buildings like that because it becomes cost prohibitive. In addition, it messes up sort of the internal parking that you need for those areas. So if you can look at building 1, which you're not looking at now, you can see that there's a big parking area. And that's to accommodate just the retail. By attempting to put the retail in 2 and 6 and then just seeing, in addition to being just cost prohibited, the parking then wouldn't work out. So that's why you don't see those types of changes in the middle of the
Did you mean
construction.
building 9? Because building 1's a
Building
clubhouse.
9, Building 9 will be built, well, is not going to be a fully wood building because of the spans. So there's cost added to that up to, it could be between $500 and $1 million added cost. And that's for that small building. And that's just to provide the retail, which is what, so I guess what I'm saying is the retail market is challenging. And in addition to the retail market being challenging, to provide retails in these buildings is really costly. So that's why it's not done in the percentages that you guys would like to see. Doing it in the other two buildings that front Main Street, the parking eventually wouldn't work, and then it would be cost prohibitive for those buildings also. So that's why we didn't try that.
That was my question. I was concerned on what the hardship would have been, and it sounds like it's cost as well as the design and parking.
It's both. I mean, that's why, I didn't really mention it during my initial presentation, but that's why you see these mixed-use developments around Connecticut. Where retail is like 4, 5, 6%. You don't see it any more than that because of the cost considerations in addition to the market. Because you're getting less rent, and then you're increasing the costs exorbitantly on that building. And the economics just don't work. So that's why that would be a great idea if those two factors didn't exist.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Piggybacking off that, I'm sorry, I'm next.
No.
Piggyback off Commissioner Glico, Building 9, you stated that there's a heavy investment in Building 9 when it comes to building it. Second and third floor of that building is residential. Is there a possibility for that to be light office use, like acupuncturists, accountant offices, those kind of things? Because you were already invested in building that building commercially, why residential on those 2 floors versus adding a little bit more commercial space? If that's considered commercial space, can you state why we can't have more on top of that, or does it come down to?
Well, again, the additional cost is just on the ground floor of the sort of what we call the platform of the building, the podium. So the cost, most of the cost is in that first floor. When you go above that building, we then transform the construction technique to wood. And then the bearing on wood is a lot different than the large spans. So the building itself is not set up for that. That's the first reason. The second reason is we're trying to create a balance of what we think is financeable, and that's why we've come up with the 8%, which is far in excess of what other developers are doing across the Connecticut. So we're kind of balancing that also. Additionally, there is a component of affordable housing here too, which is in the community. So in this development, there's 20% of the community that we're basically losing money on, and for good reasons. And we're not complaining about it. I think the retail enhances both the town and our residents. I think affordable housing. I'm a master's in planning with a specialization in affordable housing, so there's no more bigger proponent of affordable housing than myself. But there comes a point where there's a limit to how much the financings can withstand, both affordable housing and retail that sort of barely pencils or loses money. So that's kind of where we are. So 20% of the development, which I think is a big part of the development, is for those sort of public purposes, or try to enhance the residents and the community.
Okay, so just for a frame of reference for everyone else, that the size of that building is approximately the same size as where Starbucks is in Town Center and on the west side of town. That size building, so that's what we're looking at there, so we know.
Building 9, you mean?
Yeah.
It has a footprint of 9,500 feet, yeah.
Yeah. That building I'm talking about is about 10,000 square feet, so it's comparable. Shifting gears to the sidewalks on the Silas Dean, there have been many comments about how close they are to the Silas Dean. Are you proposing to move the existing sidewalks, or you're just going to use them?
You talking, Tom? You want to address the sidewalks on the Silas Dean or Main Street? Are you talking about
Across,
right in front of Main Street?
Right on your frontage of buildings 2.
Down.
Yeah, we'll be replacing them. in the same location. So
Okay,
we'll
so
be
exist-
upgrading them to meet the town standard with the banding. But as you know, the detail is the sidewalk starts, it's curb line, green strip, and then the sidewalk goes right up to the right-of-way line is your town standard. So we'll be ripping them out and cleaning. They're actually, you walk them out there, they're actually pretty decent shape. But we're showing you we're going to get the town standard detail with the banding. So it would go in generally the same location.
Okay.
Yep.
So they've been there for a while, so we understand traffic flow and walkability. And has there been any consideration now that there's going to be buildings there of, I don't put bollards because they look horrible, but decorative boulders or something that can stop something in that area? Has that been considered?
We could look at putting decorative boulders in.
Not obviously between the sidewalk and the main street, but between the sidewalk and the buildings. There's a concern there that the proximity to the sidewalk and the road and wherever it is, again, not bollards because that's horrible looking, but
Sure.
I mean, you can use decorative stones or decorative
And
boulders or something. You guys are pros, you know what you're doing.
Decorative bollards too. If you go to like Boston, you can see them. They're really nice. But the good thing about it is that's it's a through movement. But I know you watch the news every day where some car went, over and everything. But we have put these buildings close to it, and we have not experienced that. But we could incorporate into the landscape. You saw where we had landscape some protective bollards that don't look like bollards, or some stones. But
Sure.
we'll get with our traffic engineers and do some studies there. We clearly have to go to OSTA too, and they'll be looking at about what we're doing on the frontage there too.
Okay, staying with the, what you're doing, so you proposed the pocket park here, and existing conditions show a very horrible fence along that northern property line. Can you talk about what you're going to be doing to the existing fence and/or what you're replacing around the property?
Yes, so the fence today, so there's areas, especially on the southern end, I think towards Pratt Street, either the fence is there or it's completely shot. So that will be all new fence in that area.
What kind of fence are you talking about? White, picket, decorative?
It'll probably be sort of a picket vinyl fence of some sort. Probably, depending upon where it is, either white or black.
Yeah. And then on what we were thinking on the fence you're talking about is, and the town has expressed a concern with this, the posts are all bad out there. All the posts are leaning, but the panels are actually in decent shape. So at this point, unless the applicant feels differently, the plans currently show that we would basically replace all the posts and then salvage what panels we can, and if there's any damaged panels, we would have to just get rid of them. But we also know, if you look at the landscaping plan, we're also putting plantings in front of the fence and behind the fence. So it's a layered approach there. So, but at a minimum, once we get out there, we may find out the fence is just too shot, but I drove out there and it looked like the fence posts were the problem. Everything was all leaning, and I've heard from the town that was a concern. So clearly those were put in wrong, and we'll replace all the.
Do you own the fence, or does 2360 next door in that condo
We own the fence,
association?
and I think there was a neighbor here last time who said, "You own the fence."
Nice.
So and also I think the nice space is facing the neighbors, so I would assume they put it right. So we own the fence.
Okay.
Yep.
My last question for right now, Building 7, you talked about a waiver on the height. You showed 2 windows on that high peak. Is that going to be a 4th floor, like studio space, or is that just an attic decorative?
So what happens, we can pull it up again. So that roof line changes. So if you could see the ends of the building, and we raise the roof line to get that peak. That, in some of the apartments, we have something called lofts, and they're internal to the apartment. And James did mention it. It's sort of like 1/3 of the lower living room is set aside for a loft. It's a couple hundred square feet. I don't know exactly. And people do their business up there. They have their work set up, and it's kind of become more popular with people sort of staying at home now with COVID. So that's why you see that. That's why you see that. That's another reason why you see that roof going up and the articulation.
For right now, I have nothing further.
Thank you. Commissioner Morholz?
Okay. Well, as far as, I have a question for Kim. Does this project require approval of the Open Space and Conservation Commission?
No, they were reviewed by the open space agent and Bob Alvarado, who actually sits at those meetings, and no, it does not.
Okay. I had a comment about the MDC report on tab 13. Apparently, that's going to be updated because you noted it earlier that it's based on 180 units, not 213.
Typically what happens is they won't even look at the development until you guys opine on, whether it's approved to save some work. They did us a favor early on and actually looked at it preliminarily. Subsequent to us filing, we actually went ahead and made an application to MDC. And obviously, we can't build the community if the services are not provided there. But we sort of went along in the standard procedure with the MDC.
Yeah, we tried to push them to get a letter for this, but the MDC kind of moves at a different pace. But I will honestly tell you, they are actively reviewing it.
Okay.
And as soon as we get that letter, obviously we can't proceed anyways, so we have to proceed. So we'll get that letter to the town as soon as we receive it.
I'll say this, we're further ahead than most in
Yes.
Rocky Hill or in other towns with the MDC. Usually the MDC won't even look at it until
Yeah, correct.
the zoning,
Okay.
planning and zoning.
Yeah,
So we're ahead of the game there.
I just caught that in your presentation that it's based on a February proposal.
Correct.
In fact, my comments, these are some of these are comments, some are not questions. In February, there were 180 units. In July, it went up to 202, and now it's at 213. So I'm going to joke, we better approve this quickly before it's not 500.
Part of
Kidding.
the reason, why I mentioned this earlier, and I think that's maybe a reason why I mentioned it. Originally, we had a completely different vision for this site. And then after meeting with the staff, and we were encouraged to sort of change the development. And as we changed to the development, I won't go into the particulars, but part of it was adding retail and office. But as we got into the particulars, the unit count kind of moved up a little bit. So
Okay. So we've got to move.
I would say, when we put the 180 in, I'm not sure we actually had a plan.
We didn't have a
At
plan.
that point, it was just a thing to get, because we thought it was important to contact the MDC, and the town encouraged us to talk to MDC early. So that, and then actually MDC was cooperative. So we kind of threw a number out. I'm not sure we actually had a plan.
for the early one, you're
Yeah,
right.
that first one, and then I think you're referring to the informal presentation on the second one.
Okay, so where we stand now, we have 333 bedrooms.
If you did the math right, yeah.
Yeah.
Then I.
How many lofts are you going to have? Because people use those lofts as bedrooms also.
No, there's no. I mean, what happens is there's no real closets up there, so we rarely see that being used as bedrooms. And we also put that in our lease that they're not allowed to use lofts as bedrooms. But we don't have closets up there, so it really is workspace.
Like an
Or
attic.
when I first rented a loft when I got out of college, I used it as my TV room. You see it both.
Okay, I did the opposite. I had a one-bedroom with a loft, and I slept in the loft for 12 years. So,
It was a nice thing.
okay. So now we have 9 buildings, and I'm not going to add up all the stories. So we have 21 stories altogether. Some are bigger, some are smaller, and we have 1 floor of commercial space.
We
So
have
that's just an observation that I
3
have.
floors. We have the retail floor and then the 2 floors of office.
Yeah. And now, as far as the office is concerned, office building, are you going to lease out that entire building, or are you going to use one of the floors for your management office?
No, that will be completely for public leasing. Our management
So
office.
there won't be any on-site.
Well, the on-site manager office is actually contained in the leasing office, the leasing clubhouse.
Oh, okay.
So what
Okay.
happens is half of that building is the leasing office. Maybe out of the 5,000 feet, 1,500 or 1,000, and then the balance is amenities.
Okay. You have 2 four-story buildings, and the rest are 3. I'm not sure if there's a requirement for elevators in any of those buildings.
They're actually the 4-story buildings, which is the first, one of the street buildings, and then one of the split buildings in the back. They're actually not considered 4-story buildings. They're actually considered 3-story buildings with a basement, technically under the construction code. But there's not a requirement to put elevators in them. So what happens is the parking for at least the split building is in the front of the building. So when people walk in, they only have to walk up 2 stories, and then there are elevators in the other split building because the parking's on the 4-story side.
Okay.
So with this parking on the four-story side, there's no requirement to provide elevators, but we provide them because we can't have residents walking up 4 stories or 3
Right,
stories.
yeah.
So yes, on the 4-story split with the parking in the back, no on the 3-4 split with the parking in the front.
Okay, and you'll probably hear that there's also safety concerns and medical concerns for a 4-story building. Okay, this is just an observation that the 4-story building on the Silas Dean, in Rocky Hill on the Silas Dean, there's only 3 other 4-story buildings. All of them, those 3 are set back. This one is, well, I'm going to get to that in a few minutes. This one is right on the Silas Dean. So, that's something that we don't have in town now.
Well, remember, from the front, from the main street, that's a 3-story side. So you will not see a 4-story side from Main Street on that building. The 4-story side is on the other side. And we did that to make up that grade. And that's where you're providing elevators, on that back side.
Okay. That's building number 2. Sorry, building 2.
So there is a brake line. This building. There's a brake line?
Yeah.
Are you seeing this on screen on yours?
We're
Yes.
seeing,
Right.
yeah, you have the plan on the computer screen
Yeah.
also?
So yeah, building two, the 3-story side is what faces Main Street. So you only see the 3-story. The 4-story steps down because the lowest side of the site is back where that lift station is in the upper left-hand corner. So everything naturally topos back to that site. So that's the reason we did the split level building.
Okay, so that's the same height as the buildings.
Correct. They are next to each other. They're the same height elevation. They might be a foot different working with the existing grade out on Main Street, but they are not a 3-story versus a 4-story.
Okay. Back in
Can I have silence, please?
back in July, we were told, excuse me, that there'd be a mix of structures including carriage homes and townhomes. I don't see either one of those on the plan.
Mark, do you want to talk about
That's not the application before you
I know,
tonight.
I know. I'm asking, are there carriage homes and townhomes anymore?
Now, what we ended up doing, to try to provide sort of more green space, we ended up eliminating those carriage homes and then adding those units to a different building is what we did. We sort of eliminated those small buildings.
And you added 4 garage structures.
We could have.
So the other thing we did, if you notice on the right-hand corner, it's buildings, garages out there. That's originally where the carriage houses were, that were going to be a 2-story building. So that's part of the reason where we took those to a garage. So it's a 1-story building adjacent to the abutters to help with that grade transition coming across the site. So that's part of the other reason we did it, was to help with that height transition coming from the single family going into our property.
Okay.
The townhomes we're building 8 is right now, and those were townhomes there.
Okay.
A lot of that stuff was to try to buildings down near the border.
All right, and we've also heard a few times that there's a mix of residential, commercial, and office. But actually, you have an office, you have commercial, and then you've got residential. There's a mix normally means you have some here, some there, and some there. So that's not the concept that you're actually proposing to us,
Well, no,
correct?
the overall community is a mix of 3 different uses. It's residential, there's some residential, there's some retail, and there's some office. That's a mixed-use community
Okay.
by definition.
Getting back to the number of bedrooms and the students, which I know we're not supposed to dwell on. That won't be anything that may make or break this. But with 333 bedrooms, I find it hard to believe there'll only be 15 children living in all those bedrooms. I think maybe we should get maybe go to the Board of Education and see what they can forecast.
As I referenced, if I may, I'm sorry, Mark, I did reference a report that Ray Carpentino had done because it came up in the past concerning multifamily as well. And he did put a report together. He did consult with the Board of Ed to actually get the data from all of the complexes in town. The complexes that most would mirror these would be either the Altera apartments on Brook Street or Montage, which is like a sister development on West Street. As part of Town Center West.
But his report was based on rent, the rent that would be paid by the residents.
Let me just interject a little. I could provide some clarity to it. We did this for a number of sources. The first source we looked at was something called a Rutgers study that's published that sort of projects out what school-age population would be, across the state in Connecticut. And those figures, just in general, are, and I'm off the top of my head, but those figures are 0.01 for one-bedrooms. That means for every 100 one-bedrooms, you'll get one school-age kid. And about, depending upon what Rutgers study you use, 0.05 for two-bedrooms. That means for every two-bedroom, you get 5 school-age kids. Ray then actually looked at what was happening at Altera and Montage, which are similar. It won't be to say similar, but they're equivalent. They're luxury apartment communities. And when you apply those Rutgers study numerals to the continental properties, they come out to actually more than what those two continental properties have. So that's why we come up with a projection of about 15, using both the Rutgers studies and then using real-world data that we have from the Altera and Montage. And in my experience, too, that's basically what we have. In Cromwell, we did this analysis, based upon what our occupancies are, and those ratios hold. And that's real-time live data from the town next door to here. That 0.01 and 0.05 is pretty accurate. For school-age kids, not toddlers, because people will be in the community that have newborns. But once they start to get into school age, they tend to move out of the apartments and they tend to buy homes in either here or Cromwell. That tends to what happens. Now 3 bedrooms generate quite a bit of school-age kids, but we haven't provided 3 bedrooms in this community. We haven't proposed 3 bedrooms for that reason.
Okay. Now, as far as affordable housing is concerned, are you going to have dedicated units for affordable housing? Or
part of your package, I think Joe submitted sort of a affordable housing compliance plan, which shows, which basically has us reporting yearly incomes of the affordable apartment homes. What happens with the affordables is the way the plan was drawn up, they sort of, and someone asked this question, so I'm glad you asked it, they sort of move around the community based upon if someone then exceeds their income. So what happens is we establish the affordable housing distributed across every building, distributed by unit type. Okay. So if everyone has in the percentages of whether the ones and twos. So 10% of the ones would be affordable, 10% of the twos would be affordable, distributed equally around the buildings. What could happen is someone, and it happens frequently, somebody who was making $60,000 a year now is making $65,000 and no longer qualifies for affordable housing. That unit then no longer becomes affordable, and then the next unit that comes available will then be an affordable. So that we don't have them designated. And what that actually, the benefit of that is, frankly, all the apartment homes are identical. Well, if we have courts in the affordable, if we have courts in the market rate, we have courts in the affordables, because the affordables can, so the affordable units are indistinguishable from the market rate apartments, which is a nice benefit.
That's what I was driving at, yeah. I didn't want you to say that all the affordable housing is going to be in like building 3.
No.
And you're going to, okay.
And there was a question about, how do we verify there? Every year, the town will get a report on the affordable residents and how they qualify. And if we're out of the 10% compliance for a week, you'll know that also.
Okay. I think we talked a little bit about the privacy of the neighboring houses and condominiums. That's probably a concern when you have a three-story building looking down into the backyard of someone's house. We had an issue with another development last year about things like that.
Well, I mean, in general, the buildings that we have chosen that abut the neighbors are two-story buildings. There's the two-story office building, there's building 8 in general.
Well, you have building 10 that's looking into the backyard. Actually, one of those houses doesn't have a backyard.
8 is 3-story.
Building 8's 2-story, building 10 is 2-story, and building 11, which is the office, is 2-story.
So basically, again, what we did was put the two-story buildings next to the neighbors.
Building 10
Building 10 is 3.
3-story.
Building 8 is 3 and building 10 is 3.
Yep, they both are 3.
According to the plan, it is.
They're mislabeled.
The only two-story building is your
Oh,
office.
your plan says different
Yeah,
there.
they're mislabeled.
They're mislabeled. The elevation.
The elevation show too. Sorry about that. They're two-story buildings.
Their submission has the same thing, so I think it's
It's a mistake.
an error.
I'm getting to the end of this, don't worry.
Oh, I'm enjoying the conversation with you, so no.
Well, I lived in multi-family houses for 35 years, so I'm familiar with all the aspects of this stuff.
I'm gonna ask for a couple dollars back from Joe since we're paying him to do this. So.
Now, in the pictures that we saw earlier, a better question, let me get to that. What is the distance of the actual structure of building number 2 and 6 from the sidewalk and from the curb?
Say it again. I'm sorry, I missed it.
The actual distance from the building itself, the wall, to the sidewalk, and then to the curb. Because we're talking about a 6-foot setback, but that's a setback from your property line, not the actual sidewalk itself.
They don't have a variance, right?
That's good.
Right? They can't, they gotta ask for a variance. Just say no.
It's anywhere from 15 to 20 feet from the curb line to the building face.
So it would be about 10 to 15 feet from the sidewalk, roughly? Okay.
Well, the sidewalk, the face of the sidewalk is right at the right-of-way per your town standard. So we have a green strip sidewalk, and then, yes, we're 10 feet
Okay.
from the property line to the face of the building.
So the building itself is about 15 feet off the curb.
15 to 20, it varies as it goes on the front.
So it's not right on top of the Sidewalk Highway.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to read a couple of things out of the Plan of Conservation and Development. On page 49, it says, "The importance of the overall design to the success of the town center cannot be understated. Development of the town center must be led by the town, or it may not be successfully done. When the town reacts to a development proposal submitted by others, its review is limited to those things the developer wants to do rather than the things the community needs to do." So I think that's something that everybody should keep in mind. And then there's a table, the design issue and possible guidelines. These aren't cast in stone. Provide a storefront on street front sides of the building. Now, this is building, but it really is buildings in this case. We only have a storefront on one building.
Yes.
Blank walls, that's the. Uses encourage or require active uses such as retail stores or restaurants rather than passive units such as banks and offices. But I think the point is that the whole concept behind the Plan of Conservation and Development and the recent rewrite of the zoning regulations is that we don't want to have just apartments. We want to have a mix of, and we don't, my feeling is we don't have a mix. We have one building that's a retail or commercial, and one building that's an office way off on the side of the complex. And plus we've got setbacks, establish a build-to line on a maximum front setback rather than a minimum setback. I'm not sure if it's possible to move those buildings back a little bit or not, but that's something I think would be encouraged.
I mean, part of our moving the buildings closer to the road, which I guess is between 15 and 20 feet, was to create the streetscape that sort of was referred to in the plan of development. The farther the setback, and again, earlier concepts had the buildings set back further. Part of the concept of activating the street was to connect the front doors of the residential to the sidewalk, and to connect the retail to the sidewalk. And there, when people leave their apartments, they sort of activate that streetscape. So originally, our thought was to increase the setback, but we purposely pulled it closer to the street, just to activate that streetscape. So that was intentional.
But the purpose of the town center is to not accommodate the residents that are going to be there, but the people in town who are going to be walking the streets, who are going to be riding their bicycles, and actually, it's for the town. It's not for the 300 or 400.
Well, it's for both, because part of having, because the new residents will be then part of the town, and part of activating the street is getting people to walk on the sidewalk, and that I think it's one and the same.
But okay, I'm not going to debate it. I shouldn't be debating this. I think that takes care of me. I'm sorry to take up so much time.
My pleasure.
But I missed you last week, or a couple
my
weeks
pleasure.
ago, so I had to make up for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Robbins.
All right, so it's come up a couple times, but it just didn't, again, it was a question I had at the last meeting, my first question. And we've heard about how we've gone from 180 to 202 to 213. So my question simply was, you probably can answer it tonight, was just what was the thought process that kept driving the need for additional residential units, which actually resulted in a percent decrease in the amount of mixed use on the property. So
Again, I think the 180 wasn't sort of a real number. There's something we put out there to get the letter going for capacity. So your question is, where did the extra 10 apartments come from? I guess really from 203
yeah,
to
the thought, the evolution.
Part of it was when we designed the site more finely, the front building, which was originally a 3-story building, then became a 3-4 split, building 2. And when building 2 became a 3-4 split, to make up the grade, we had to add apartments there to make up that grade. That's actually exactly what happened.
Okay.
It was site design.
You know, on that sense, was there ever any considerations of doing a 2-3 split or doing a shorter building?
I mean, I think if you look at, if you look at the elevations, right? I think the 3 stories on the street side, we did. We did consider 2 stories on that side, and we debated it. We even debated 4 stories on the street, and we came to the conclusion of the 3-story was probably the best solution. And we think what we've done is designed very attractive buildings on the front. And I think you lose some of that attractiveness, especially with the detail that we have if you go down to 2 stories. I personally like the 3-story buildings on the street better than the 2-story building in the back, to accommodate the neighbors and buffer the height there. So I'm proud of the buildings that we designed. I think they're attractive looking, and I think they'll fit in nicely.
It's just, I do notice that those ones on the street are the ones with the flat roofs, whereas the other buildings have pitched roofs. Again, we have some preliminary comments from our village district consultant that is taking issue with the design, its appearance, its compatibility with what we're trying to accomplish. We don't have a final report from our village consultant. Kim, are we going to get one?
We would need to leave the hearing open for that. Yes.
Yeah,
We should be getting a
He raised a
final
number of
report.
concerns in his preliminary, and he hadn't had the chance to review a final design. And I think his comments are truly important to our final decision.
Let me just clarify that the two buildings that you guys are referring to are actually not flat roof buildings. They are shallow pitched buildings. We sort of had this discussion last time. They're shallow pitched buildings with a parapet to create the visual that they're flat, because that's sort of the design that we wanted to portray on the street. So we're actually spending considerable extra money to have the buildings look like flat roofs when they're actually not. They're actually slightly pitched roof behind a parapet, which you can't see.
Yeah, I'm just saying though that you're not getting a full pitched roof that would give you something more in something of a colonial architecture type scenario or some traditional architecture, and or consistent with the other buildings on the property. But it's just an observation, and again, we look forward to hearing back from our village consultant. Another thing I asked, and maybe you tried to answer it early, but it was just a simple question about if we could see the calculations for how you calculated the impervious cover, because you're at the max at 75%. And we just wanted to see how what you counted and what you didn't count.
I think, Tom, you tried to address it. I don't know if...
Yeah, well, for the record, Tom Daly, we are not the max. We're at 64%. So your impervious coverage calculation, so your regulations are very specific.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. It was
So-
64.
so
75% is the max.
We
Yeah.
calculated, we use a computer, so it's really not calculations. You use AutoCAD to calculate things. So we included all sidewalks, all pavement, and all buildings, and even the club, the pool area. That was all included into the calculations per your regulations.
Okay, thanks. The other, of course, is the maximum building height being at 45, and you have one building that exceeds that. That's building 7, so that's above the zoning regs for the maximum building height. Again, that would be a variance that I don't believe this group has the authority to approve. That would have to go to appeals, wouldn't it?
You do actually you gave yourself the authority in the town center regulation. It's not a variance. Same with the setback.
Part of the setback and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh, no, but that was specific to setbacks.
I'm pretty sure it refers
But
to
did it
building height
include
also.
roof lines? Because I only thought that was specific to setbacks.
Yeah, I believe the building height is in there too.
All right. We'll check that. But on that same philosophy, and you've heard a number of concerns tonight. Again, you're 6 feet from the property line with buildings. Is it 2 and 6? 2 and 6. You're 6 feet from the property line. And according to this diagram on 19, well, first of all, the setback we set up for town center district for front yard is 35 feet, and we're at 6. And extremely close to the road. Even your front door is fairly close to the road. But in order to get your streetscaping in there, on this diagram here on 19, that in the presentation you gave us today, you're actually having to push looks like you're having to push the sidewalk out closer to the street to make room for the streetscaping, whereas the pedestrians that are going to walk along Main Street, was an extremely busy street, are going to be right next to the street, which really is not a safe place to be, especially in the winter. So, again, I just want to emphasize this development needs 6 feet. Is just too close. It's got to. I'm not saying it has to be 35, but it can't be 6. That area has to widen. The other thing I wanted to mention, one of the things I had, and it's a concern, again, about mixed use and the viability of mixed use. You've raised a number of concerns about certain things are difficult to do and so on. And at this point, I mean, we call it residential, but from what I've read, the definition of residential are single-family units or buildings with 4 units or less. We have buildings throughout the entire complex of 4 buildings or more. So by definition, this is a commercial multi-family housing project.
No, it's multifamily, yeah.
Yeah, it's commercial.
It's residential. It's multifamily residential. People live there.
Yeah, but the
not
technical
commercial.
definition is commercial.
I don't know.
But because of the intensity, when you have that kind of intensity for residential, it's considered a commercial development. But anyways, the concern I have is with the retail. One of my questions in the last meeting was, what plans will be put in place to help ensure, foster that those retail units get put in place, and when they're put in place, steps are taken to keep them viable and functional? Because if those disappear, I mean, we really don't have a mixed unit development anymore. We have a commercial multifamily housing project.
I mean, the way the plans, I mean, what I think we've done is we've designed space with the plaza and the parking in the rear that will be attractive to retailers. That's, other than that, I'll say this. When we talk about retail like this, I consider it an amenity for our residents and the community. It doesn't behoove us to keep these storefronts vacant, because I consider this an amenity to the residents. So we will get the right retailers in there, and we will move the leasing rates around to make sure we have the proper mix of retailers that complement the residential nature of this community. So that's how we're going to accommodate this. We're not going to take a retailer that provides us with the most money. We're going to take a retailer that most complements our residential community and the town.
Okay.
And we couldn't do that if there was 30% of retail on the site.
The other thing that I'd asked in the last meeting, it was just could you provide us with the basis and the justification that the development building's design ties in with the surrounding land uses, which includes the Memorial Green, the ancient cemetery, single-family houses. It's got multiple surrounding land uses, and it's got 4 sides to it. Now, you could argue that on the commercial side towards Main Street, that things might align, but then you have all the other sides, and so you have office space next to residential. You even have retail across the street from the Memorial Green, but in fairness, you got a CVS building across the street, so that's probably not. But no retail on the part where we have the bulk of commercial, which is on Main Street. So again, and we've heard people say it before, there was just a concern that we don't have retail in that place where people will probably walk the most often, which is buildings 2 and 6. And again, that need to have some setbacks, that could also be linked to the possibility of putting some of that retail parking in the front. I'm not saying, I think you've looked at that, but again, that would be more conducive to both walking and riding and biking. It's just to have everything right there where they could just pull in and out. Or even if there was parking in the front, then you wouldn't, have to cross the sidewalks. You could just go through the entrance and just go up the side. But anyways, so again, it's just a lot of questions just about building 2 and 6, especially with those setbacks. The 2 and 6 setbacks. 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 2 and 6 setbacks The other question I had, the other question I have, one of the biggest questions I have, and this is verbatim out of our regulations, and I'm not quite sure y'all can entirely answer it yourself, because it's kind of bigger than you, but it's something that in our own regulations we're directed to consider. Now, I heard a comment earlier that making decisions based on cost to the town is the equivalent of fiscal zoning, and that's illegal. But I don't think this particular thing that's covered under supplemental regulations, which I stated verbatim, is actually illegal. Kim, do we have a reason to think that that's illegal? The supplemental consideration that says reduction of a proper ratio between the taxable values of real property in the area
Where
and
are
the cost
you?
of the municipal services provided therein.
Page one.
That's page 144, supplemental considerations, design, architecture, and aesthetics, 4E.
Okay, this is a special permit process under which one of the items you must, which they must submit, is a site plan as part of their special permit. So we're going with the special permit criteria.
Right.
So
So under,
we don't ask, nor do we, if we, looking at it from a practical standpoint, any development will impact services.
no, I understand. But what our own regulations are saying here, as zoning board commissioners, in our review of the special permit, it is our responsibility to look at the supplemental considerations to make a decision about appropriateness of the location or use, unusual features, design, architecture, and aesthetics, and traffic. I'm not going to read them all to you, but there's just so many of them. And this is such a big development that's a 50 to 70-year decision. You know, this is the time for us
That's
to.
a site plan, right? That's a
Yeah,
site
well,
plan.
they did submit a traffic report also. And
Yeah.
you did get,
Yeah, no, I'm just referring to the information about trying to assess the value of the development
let me-
as proposed to the town
Well,
versus
we've
the
given it-
impacts to our town for the things that have to happen next, which is to provide town resources to this.
Yeah, let me just,
Development.
we've tried to, Joe's caveat is, I think, is appropriate here, but we've tried to provide you with some of the information, in context with what Joe Williams is saying. We gave you what we believe is a fair estimate of school-age children, and we gave you an estimate that they usually are distributed amongst the different grades. So we gave you that number. The town also currently has comparable multifamily developments that I think charge, or the taxes there are about $3,000 to $3,500 per unit per year. So that's sort of on the revenue side. We've given you the school-age generation. What's left sort of is town services like fire, police, that kind of services. The cost of that.
Yeah.
Just in general, this community, is total 100% maintained by us. We own the utilities, we own the garbage, we do our own garbage service. We maintain our own repairs. So those kind of things the town does not pick up. Our staff is on site, 24/7, between 6 and 8 people. So they sort of take care of their grounds, and we also employ local employees to do all this work. Fire calls, police calls are the only other public services that sort of get called upon. The buildings are fully sprinklered. You rarely have a fire call or a police call in a community like this. These are qualitative. These are sort of qualitative based on my 35 years of doing this, building these types of communities in different towns. So we've sort of given you some of it.
Yeah,
Given
I
Joe's
think we can connect the dots
caveat.
with the rest.
given
But I
Joe's
think-
caveat about fiscal zoning, we sort of tried to give you some information to try to answer that question in light of what Attorney Williams has said.
Okay. So actually, I think at this point, I just, the last thing, I'm sorry, the last thing I mentioned too was, when we make a decision, we want to make it based on the latest information with the updated details. And one thing I'd asked for in the last meeting was we didn't get see the visuals or architectural plans for buildings 11, 3, 4, 7, and 8. There's a number of we're waiting. We've already heard about. We're waiting for the MDC update letter.
Typically, MDC won't act on a project until planning and zoning acts on a project.
gonna-
So you're
we're
not
not-
going
we're
to
not
get a
gonna get that.
decision from MDC.
So we submitted the elevations that you requested, even though we weren't sure that they were required by the regulations, but you requested them, Commissioner Robbins, so we went ahead and provided those and submitted those to you. Secondarily, we kind of went over the MDC. We're not going to get a decision by MDC, nor does MDC give anyone a decision. We actually got more than what an applicant usually gets from the MDC. Usually they only take action after a project is approved because they don't like wasting their time.
Yeah.
Same thing with the power companies. That's just standard pro forma with utility companies. So we actually got more, saying that there is capacity for 180 units, and that's more than what we usually get from MDC. So,
Okay.
and obviously, if there's no sewer capacity or water capacity, which is sort of a separate commission in many towns also, if the town sort of is in charge of those services, those are sort of separate applications that go into, if the town sort of had a WPCA, those are separate applications like Wetland Commission. So if we don't have capacity, the approval's worthless, but we believe we do.
Okay. And the other thing I asked for at the last meeting was just if we could get the figures that were missing in the materials. You may have given, but we didn't get the figures that were missing from the traffic study. They were numbered 1 through 12.
Well, they were submitted. You just weren't given them for the second time.
So that might be something on our end. So actually, so I'll just wrap it up with just, again, just clarifying that we should get a copy of Mr. Chalmers' final report before we go to final vote. But anyways, no more questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Brescia?
I just wanted to first thank you guys for coming back to the table and presenting the materials you did. I appreciate you bringing your samples, your architectural samples, the one sample that I saw, and I just appreciate you coming and give us some more feedback and answers to the question, and also to the public for coming, and to make some comments and help us with a lot of tough decisions, because this is going to impact us over the next 50 to 100 years, you guys. We're not going to be here when this comes to fruition, maybe, I don't know. But this is a definite decision and definite plans that we need to put for our future. I didn't have time to read your Benedict impact analysis, 24 pages that I just got on my desk tonight. Didn't have a chance to read all that, but just the title of it, Impact Analysis, the Town Center at Rocky Hill. If this is truly a town center, then we truly want to make it a town center and keep it in compliance and with all the vision and the forethought that we put a lot of work into. So I look forward to reading the Planometrics final report. We don't have that yet, so I don't see how we can even go any further in deciding what our town vision is. This something that matches it? But I counted the words town center at Rocky Hill in this report over 10 times. And in conclusion, with his report, there's no vision for the future. It says that this is the definite vision right now at this point in time. We need to be forward thinking. We need to look into the future. So right now, maybe retail is not as good as we would like it to be, but that doesn't mean that in the future it's not going to be coming back. That doesn't mean that we're going to see more mixed use increase more than 8%. of a project. So I appreciate this 24-page, and I will read it at some point, but, I do appreciate, getting that impact analysis, but I would like to be more forward-thinking into the future. Where's this going to be in 50 years? What's it going to look like? This is our legacy. This is a big deal for us. Next, I just wanted to ask, I know I asked about phases, and I know you told me that you didn't, but I looked in your application, section 14, phase 1 is what I thought said retail, but then you explained that it kind of all happens at the same time?
Yeah, there's no phasing.
phases.
There's no phases.
Because do you have any retail potentials? Do you have any?
Do you have any prospects yet?
Yeah.
You're saying? Well, we haven't marketed the site yet. So.
Okay, because I see that it's in phase 1, so I wasn't sure what these phases.
Well, these are not. Again, those are not phases.
Correct.
Those are they're sequencing. So within 24 months, the entire development will be complete.
Okay.
And we made sure we put in the first sequencing, the retail. We made sure that to give some. To give some assurances that we intended to build it. So we thought that was important.
So building 9 is definitely going to be part of your first sequencing phase?
Whatever it says right there, is it 1? Yes.
It says 1, yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I know you spoke that there's only going to be 3 bike racks throughout the complex, but I thought we wanted to be more like bike-friendly, walkable.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many bike racks there are, but we will provide as many bike racks as you go.
Like if you have the small bike racks, they only hold maybe 2 or 3. So I'm not sure.
So
what the
we
vision
actually
was.
did, what we actually.
Locations for the bike racks, but there's multiple bike racks in all locations.
Oh, okay. So there's not just 3 bike racks.
There's like 4 to 6 in each location.
Okay. And how many bike racks? I mean, how many bikes does it hold?
Well, they're two-sided, so every little hoop you can get 2 bike racks. I'd have to look at the.
Yeah. No, I just want to make sure that we're trying to build it bikeable. We're trying to.
In addition, what we did in Cromwell was actually take some of this maintenance area and make internal bike storage for
Right.
people. So not only do you have the bike racks, at the leasing office, the retail, and the pocket park, but we actually have bike storage for folks that want to keep their bike inside.
Right. Good. The dog run, that's going to be fenced in, right?
Yes.
And is it going to be supervised?
No supervision, no, just the owners.
All right.
And our staff is there. I mean, our 6 to 8 people at any one time will be there. So yeah, it's supervised.
Okay. You talked about, and thank you for bringing up the sidewalks on Pratt Street. You said 135 feet on Pratt Street, and that's going to go to I believe, to the entrance. So is it going to go from Dividend Road all the way up to the entrance on Pratt Street?
The sidewalk, you're saying?
Yes.
You did the analysis
So
on
135 is just the frontage where the office building is. That's the only land we actually control.
Okay, so that would be
But-
building number 11?
Is that what? Sorry. Yes, Building 11, that's the only frontage we have on it.
Okay.
What we committed to is if the town can secure grading rights from the properties on the office building and the 2 residential, then the applicant would be willing to install the sidewalks along the entire frontage.
Just if that should come to fruition.
Yeah,
But there is temporary grading rights. Based upon my view, it's just not so level, we can just put in the right of way. It has to blend in.
So the town has a right of way to do these public
Yes.
improvements. In order to put the sidewalk in, we may have to temporarily, disturb, the land not in the town right of way. But once it's stabilized again, the whole sidewalk then still is in the town right of way. It's just doing the work.
Correct, and that's
outside
if
the
you
right of way.
choose to do that.
We will do it.
And if I may,
We're making a commitment to
If-
do
if
it.
you-
We just
if you
don't have
choose
the
to do
grading
that.
rights. If you guys get the grading rights from us, we will do it. We just don't have ability to do stuff that's not in your right of way.
and
That's a
this commission cannot,
Yes.
as part of an action, as I'm sure you well know, they cannot say to you, you must build sidewalks on property that's not along your frontage. So that's something that needs to be discussed with town attorney.
Right.
Well, we
But
could
the-
put it-
but this
we could
commission-
suggest-
I think
well,
we can-
What we could do is put it on the
ask them.
plan, and we could
It's-
say, if the town acquires grading rights, this sidewalk will be built, so it's part of the approval.
It's not part of our approval, however,
We
it's.
can make it so you don't have to put it in any condition, so it's not an exaction. I think
We
you're worried
can't.
about it being an exaction.
Yeah.
We could put it in the plan saying, we will build the sidewalk if the town gets the grading right, so it's on the plan.
Okay, and then the sidewalks coming down on, would you go to that office building on the corner of Pratt and Dividend, or would you stop after building number 9?
Again, Tom, you looked at this, I mean, I think we were gonna wrap it as best.
There already is sidewalk on Dividend in front of the office building?
Okay,
So,
Here.
yeah, there's already, so our new sidewalk will connect right into that.
okay,
So
but it's,
yes, ultimately, if we can get grading rights, you'd have sidewalk along the entire front, around the corner of Dividend, and up to Pratt Street to our driveway.
and it would be mimicking the Main Street sidewalks with the brown pavers on either side?
Not on Pratt Street,
I don't think there's enough.
because there's not, the detail, the Main Street, that detail is just along the main road. And then on the side streets, I'm sure you just have a standard, residential that goes down there.
Okay, okay. You talked about the park lot on the corner on the northern border there. That's the access will be from Main Street, from the street end, from that sidewalk into the park for all people. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Park
so,
lot, right.
yeah, so people in wheelchairs or walkers or whatnot, you gotta be very careful about making sure it's level, because that could be a big problem for accessibility.
Yeah, we
know.
believe and we will design it for handicap accessibility.
And you're gonna have chairs and stuff in there, like benches, park benches.
We have it designed, you
Okay.
want to see?
Yeah, no, I
yes.
did see 2 benches, so.
I think we have it blown up, though. We have it. Yeah, kid. No, that's the,
There it is. So you see the tables, these little white areas in what's on your screen?
4 tables?
Yep, so there's 4 there. There's also some that you can see underneath the canopies of the trees. So there's approximately half a dozen or so tables and chairs, seating areas.
Okay.
In addition to the benches, which the benches are arched along the semicircular radius at the
Yeah,
front.
yeah, I see that.
And then there's 3 under the canopy.
Okay.
Jeez, I was gonna say that.
Sorry, took your thunder. That's not what I'm
Okay, thank you. The streetscape, the entrance for the, where is it? Building 9 for the mixed use building. The doors, are they automatic doors that open, like, push button for handicapped accessible?
They would typically not. Most retailers are not.
Oh, yeah, I know, but, if this is something that's going to be accessible for people that are in wheelchairs.
Accessible from a push standpoint, that's all that's required.
Okay, no, I'm
From a
just,
pull standpoint, as far as the number of pounds of force that need to open the door.
yeah, no, I'm just saying sometimes it's nice to have like a push button so they
Sure,
can,
I mean, if
they can
that's,
open it.
we can do that, sure.
Building 7, the 3-4 split with the, height, that's probably gonna take a variance. Now, that's the same, is building 2? Is that kind of, like if building 7 is over height, is that something compatible with building 2 to keep it within height?
The building 7 and building 2 are totally different
Yeah.
configurations, totally different footprints. Building 2, which is our main street, is what we call a corridor loaded building, where basically everything enters from the corridor. Building 7 is what we would consider a breezeway building, where you basically have walkways going up both the left and side. It's a totally different building design,
Okay,
totally not related. The only reason that the splits were put in there was to primarily work with the grading and the topo that goes to that back lower left portion of the site to avoid a bunch of import and also assist with natural drainage.
And that's how the units got added,
That's where the units got added.
okay,
to make up that grade.
okay.
So we're calling it a variance, but I guess it's not technically a variance. But it's building 7, and It's building 7 that,
And it's
requires it.
1'6" above what it is, but it's not listed as a variance.
and just.
Oh, so
just-
you would need a variance for that?
No. Not a variance, it's it's in the regulations, it's allowable as an exception.
But again, if you know, if it again, we believe that it articulates the building better because of the gable. But if this became a point of concern, we could easily reduce that level and comply.
The walkways that are between the buildings, are they all paved?
They're concrete.
Or I'm sorry, concrete, level concrete?
Yes.
Okay. And did you say that you had elevators in the 3-4 buildings,
We have elevators in building 2.
not in building 7,
No.
the 4-story?
Again,
It's not a 4-story.
Oh.
the rationale, these are 3-4 splits, so the rationale, now that I see the document here, the rationale is if you're parking on the 4-story side, it's too far for folks to walk up. So in building 2, since the parking is on the 4-story side, not visible on Main Street though, the 4-story side, an elevator is provided.
Okay.
On building 7, the split is to the rear, so the parking is on the 3-story side. So so there's only 2 stories to get up to that floor, so that's why an elevator is provided in 2 and then not in 7.
Not in 7. So if I had an ambulance call on the 4th floor in building 7, I'd have to walk up 4 flights of stairs?
No.
2 flights.
2 flights.
2 flights?
Or you'd be going down a flight. If you're parking on the parking lot side of building 7, you'd either go up 2 flights or down
down
one
one.
flight to what we consider the basement, again.
Okay, so nobody lives in the basement, right?
No,
It's terraces.
it's
They're
a terrace level, but it's a basement from a technical
When
standpoint.
he's saying
All right.
basement,
Code
it's
perspective.
from a building code.
Okay.
That's
It's a
why it's
building
not called a
code.
4-story building.
Yeah,
It is
okay.
a 3-story building with a basement from a
Okay.
code perspective.
Okay, so there's no elevator there, so I'd have to carry a stretcher up to the stairs, is that correct?
Backboard. You'd be doing a backboard.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, all right, not just asking. Okay, that's it, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the nice words. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. I just have a lot of questions on the table already, and you'll also be addressing public comments as well after we are done, right? Some of the questions that were raised. Yep. So I think we want to make sure that, whatever the public comments were that we haven't discussed, like, just briefly explain those. Have you looked at the vacancy rate on Main Street in terms of the commercial?
I mean, if you have information, we'd be happy to hear it, but the vacancy rate for retail is very high.
No, so I'm just asking, like, have you done any analysis to see,
No.
what is the vacancy rate and, what would be competing, with your development
No,
versus
we
the
haven't
others?
actually, we don't have any numbers on that.
Okay. And same question with the Montage, the Elm Street project that has a commercial or,
Residential.
yeah, the,
Most of the Class A communities in the area are 95% occupied or more.
because I think that provides a picture. As far as, and this is just a comment, and I'm trying to comprehend, we're trying to design something for next 50, 100 years. I mean, we have seen in last just couple of years that the whole thing changed when COVID came. I mean, the offices and now they're vacant and, so, do you have any insight from that perspective? Like, how can you design something that will last 100 years or 50, 100 years? I'm just trying to understand what type of principles you'll be using to design something that can last that. COVID type of thing comes and it throws everything away. I mean, it's
Well, I'll say this about our plan. Since I've been doing residential development, multifamily development, however you want to call it, for 35 years, there's always been a demand for this type of, for multifamily housing in Connecticut because there's such little supply of it. It's not, so when we talk about multifamily housing, we don't talk about we talk about the demand, yes, and that's been exacerbated by COVID. But really, what the equation is there's a lack of supply of multifamily housing. So that, since the 80s, has been very healthy. Office in Connecticut is always a struggle. It just even in the bigger cities, office has always been a struggle since the 80s. And now recently is retail. Well, I'll say this, if you're looking out 30 years, I'm pretty sure that there will be residential demand 30 years from now. The other things, I think it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell 30 years, 40 years from now whether retail will not come back the way it is 5 years ago. We know that. We know that with the advent of Amazon and the distribution centers. We know it's not coming back the way it was. What it morphs to, I don't know. I look at the malls, and I see the malls are becoming more entertainment. There's a lot more restaurants. There's a lot more of that type of stuff in the malls itself, the successful ones. Less stores, more restaurants and more entertainment. So that's the way the malls have sort of gone.
And the reason I'm asking all these questions is, you heard a lot of things, you heard a lot of comments about town center. I mean, that's what people are envisioning. And I'm trying to bring the reality, like, have you looked, can you share something and bring the reality to the table and say, okay, yes, town center. However, what is the reality today?
Well, yeah, I think part of having a healthy town center is the main part of it is having people live in the town center. And I think, we've said that a number of times. And I think with this community, folks make household income is $120,000, $140,000 a household. That's discretionary income to sort of have tertiary effects on the retail, the vacant retail, and you'll see things happening with that kind of disposable income in the town. And I think restaurants and retail. Restaurants and residential sort of recreates downtowns, and that's in whether you're in an urban area or whether you're in a suburban area. Those are the drivers of downtowns, and I think we're trying to provide that here, as a sort of a microcosm of what's made so successful downtown. And this will be viable 30 years from now, I guess. That I know.
And we heard some of the public comments about, and I think commissioners asked about the building, putting it 20, 30 feet, what's your comment on that? Like, can the building be pushed back, and what can happen to the whole development?
We could look at it if we could look at it.
I'm just trying to understand, like, what are the pros and cons?
I don't want to keep repeating myself.
Yep.
We purposely pushed the buildings to the street to sort of get that walkability and get that access and to engage the street. So we purposely pushed that close, and then we're hearing that maybe that wasn't what most like. So
no, I'm just throwing that out and trying to just so you can think about what are the pros and cons and what are I've seen downtowns where your buildings are
right on the
close because that gives you that cohesiveness between public and the buildings and businesses and stuff. Because our town center extends on Main Street even beyond this Ames property. So
you want to say?
Mr. Chairman, we could look at that, but I would suggest it would just make sense for us to do that after you decide this application, because for us to move these buildings in any material way would change the development substantially, so much that it wouldn't be appropriate to continue the same public hearing. We would need to withdraw the application and refile it. I'm not saying my client would or that it would go forward with the development. I can't pledge that, but we would have to look at it that way. So for us to do that now would sort of be almost a moot exercise, because it couldn't be officially submitted to you as part of this application, I don't think. A minor tweak here and there, sure, but then you really get into procedural issues where you change the application in a major way. After it's been filed, the hearing's been open, people have been noticed, they've come out, they've spoken on it. So I don't think that would work.
I think that's it. I think Either commissioners had.
I have a couple more small questions. How are you going to handle garbage in Building 9 and Building 11? I don't see any dumpster pads.
Building 9 and 11. So these are all the garbage for the retail space or the residential spaces are going to be handled by valet trash. The retail area and the office area, we would probably use the same dumpster that's in the back, and their maintenance would probably assist with that because, again, we'll have on-site maintenance.
Okay, so if I'm in a retail space in 9, what do I do with my trash until I have to get rid of it? Usually and what do I do with my trash in Building 11? I bring this up because we have to look at dumpster pads and all that other stuff, but I'm also concerned about any type of garbage trucks going down Pratt Street. We want them to come through, obviously, we want them to come through the main, off Main Street. We don't want them going to and from Pratt Street to come into development and take that garbage away. And then I just come to notice that there is no garbage plan for Building 9 and garbage plan for Building 11. And that's one of the things we need to look at. Another thing I wanted to throw out is, it was brought up in the public, but I was going to ask the question anyway. If I'm John or Jane Public, where can I go and where can I go? Where can I not go on this property? I can go into the parklet, I can walk down Main Street, I can go to Building 9, I can go to Building 11. Is that the only thing I can do on this property?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a governmental development or a public application, so yeah.
It was one of the questions that was asked, and I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah, it's definitely private property, except my clients offered to donate the park to the town so it would have public access, and sure, you can visit the retail. And then if you're an invitee into an office space of somebody, then, but yeah, it's not public access.
Sure. And one final thing, maybe it's for staff, or maybe it's for members of this commission. We keep on talking about town center, town center, town center, and everything we refer to. This development is called Town Center of Rocky Hill. And are we getting confused about what we're talking about when it comes to town center? Because is the town center that we talk about in our PFC, and this is a question, I'm not making a statement. The town center we talk about, it's the entire zone.
Correct.
So I want to know, so we're talking about the entire zone as a village district. So all the amenities that we talk about in the town center, we're talking about for the entire zone. I understand that we have to look at this, and this is a major anchor of the town center. But I just want to ask the question, are we all on the same page that just because this is called Town Center of Rocky Hill, you brought up, Commissioner Brescia, that Town Center of Rocky Hill, Town Center of Rocky Hill, I think we're confused about how they label the development, which we know we don't want. We don't want Town Center Development as the name of this development. I'm going on record. I can make it a condition if we want to make that a condition. And no aims. But I'm just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that when we talk about town center, we're talking about the zone. And I see a lot of shaking heads up and down.
And
I just want to make sure that when we as commissioners up here, we're not talking about the actual 12.2 acres as the town center. We're talking about the zone as the town center, right?
That's my reading, because as I was telling before, this Ames property is not the only zone. The zone extends.
Right.
So when you try to apply all these principles, you are applying to not just 12 acres, you're applying to everywhere else where the zone is.
I just want to make sure we're all on the
Yeah.
same page about that. Because it's named town center, and we talk about town center, and the town center is the zone, a lot of town centers. And we got a town center west, which we don't even want to care about in this application.
Oh.
But I just wanted to throw that out, and that's my only comment.
Yeah, and if you look at the legal notice and the wording, it's a mixed-use development, and then it just happens to be located at 2418 Main Street in the TC Town Center zoning district. So as staff and people that have reviewed the plans, it's the zoning district.
More detail. I got some more questions about that.
I'm all set. But the garbage, I think we need a garbage plan for 9 and 11.
Are you sure you don't want to ask? I mean, they can be, okay.
I just got one question, and it's probably for staff. It got brought up a few times about the bus stop, and I drove by and looked at the bus stop, and I don't understand why it was placed there to begin with.
I couldn't tell you.
It's not
That
near
would
the
be-
intersection.
Yeah, that would be something that Connecticut Transit
Right,
would
but
have
this,
to
this should be a town issue to look into.
ask. Yeah.
Not, I
And we can do that.
personally don't believe putting a crosswalk to that bus stop would be a smart thing, because there's no concrete sidewalk around it. It's not going to be maintained in the winter. So I think that's something that's the town should look at to see if it can be relocated closer to an intersection.
And that's something we can. Yeah, there are two bus routes in town, I think 55 and I think it's 119. I'm not sure. I can check with CT Transit.
Okay.
Any other questions? So,
They just have to finish with any of the public.
yes, the public, yes.
Well, it's up to you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I took notes as best I could. I didn't hear any questions that sought information that we haven't already provided that I think would be new to the commission to make your decision. They were mostly statements of opinion or things that I know you either already have or that we have talked about more over the past 3 hours of questions that have come from commissioners since the public's come. So I feel like we've covered them all very well. If there's something in particular you want me to go over, fine. Otherwise, if you tell me, no, go over every comment and provide an answer, I will try to do it as best I can, even if it's repetitive.
What about? I know someone from the audience asked about an evergreen screen along his property line.
I think we answered that. And talked about it last time, and it's in the plan. That's in the plan
It's in
already.
the plan,
yeah.
okay.
I think there was one question about the environmental, and hopefully that would probably come in the detail as far as when asbestos or lead or whatever is removed, who checks it, make sure it's done properly and things like that.
Oh, sure. And I did provide that gentleman, he wanted to see the plan. I had a copy. I gave it to him. And the answer is we will have licensed professionals who are handling this. You have to be a licensed abatement contractor to deal with asbestos. And so, like with anybody else, your license is on the line to comply with state and federal regulation. And we will hire people that will do so, and will certify that they have done so. And so, yeah, any hazardous materials like that will be removed pursuant to their obligation of their licensure.
Mhm.
I think the gentleman's question, though, was it going to be inspected or overseen by a private or an independent lab? Or is
The
it
way-
town
yeah,
overseeing
Yeah,
it?
the way, yeah, we can answer that. The way the sort of
Licensed,
Connecticut's set up,
I'm sorry.
there's things called LEPs, licensed environmental professionals,
She's not.
that sort of have some sort of connection to the state. So what you do is we do a hazardous material survey, which we go through the building. Hazardous materials identified, whether it's lead paint, asbestos, PCBs. We identify them. We then get the plan approved by the LEP about how we're going to get rid of this material. While the abatement's going on, the licensed environmental professional is on site watching the abatement go on. Typically, and this happens in every job, typically not every hazardous waste material is identified during the survey. There could be a insulation board on the footing or on the wall, stem wall, that we couldn't possibly have tested. The licensed environmental professional then takes a sample of that board, sends it to the lab to see if it's hazardous material. If it is, we increase the abatement, procedure at that point. All this is documented. When we finish the abatement, or when we're ready to ship the material off-site, there's only a few plants that actually take some of this stuff. Some are in Ohio, some are in Pennsylvania. The licensed environmental professional then has to verify that the debris coming off the site has these known quantities of hazardous material, because PCBs go to one plant, one yard, asbestos goes to another yard, so that has to be documented in the manifest. The truck driver even gets involved in the oversight, because if he or she, and I say she because that was the last one we did, if she doesn't see she doesn't see the reports that has the manifest of what's going to the yard, she cannot then deliver it to the plant. So this is so finely scrutinized and so finely regulated that it's hard not to be in compliance, because there's so many bodies looking at this. In Cromwell down the road, which we thought was a $300,000 abatement, ended up being a $650,000 abatement for some of the reasons that we uncovered during the demo of these buildings, and mainly it's subsurface when these problems happen, not above surface. All that is detailed in that kind of list of, and it's even more detailed than what we provided you, and I think what Joe gave to the nice gentleman that was here.
Thank you.
The demo will be monitored through the building department and possibly using third party, that we don't know.
Yep. If no further questions, I think the next step is
We do have to wait. Yeah, and we do have to wait for Glenn Chowder's final report.
Right.
Because of timeframes, and I think I may have mentioned this to Attorney Williams on the phone, there may have to be an extension, obviously,
Yep.
because I don't see the commission meeting prior to January 1st. So our next regular meeting is January 19th. We always have on our schedules, and we've been doing this yearly for several years, is we set aside the third Wednesday for regular meetings, and we also have the fourth Wednesday as a meetings for regulations or what have you. We could always go to that as well. So, but that will take us through January 26th. I suggest if we do that route, we go beyond that, because this time of year, even though it's going to be 60 degrees tomorrow, I mean, it is going to be the winter, and we may have snow someday. I don't know. Depending on weather. And the commission also has the option of setting a special meeting. So.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I mean, our preference would be to close the hearing. It doesn't mean the commission can't receive another piece of input from Mr. Chalder if you would like that. I mean, we saw his opinion, and as you saw, we didn't change our design in response to it. We strongly disagreed with his opinion, frankly. I didn't think it reflected knowledge of what the building and the architectures are in the center of Rocky Hill, nor did he asked for something that we could provide, because there are, as we showed, there aren't any buildings right around ours that are like ours. We're trying to create a new place here. But we did show the town hall, which has some relationship to the building materials. So, I mean, we believe we've addressed it. I don't think there will be anything new with a final report from Mr. Chalder. I don't think a final report from Mr. Chalder is going to cause us to substantially change, the architecture or the presentation that we've made. Again, the commission is certainly permitted to take input from your advisors after a hearing is closed. So you could close the hearing, and your staff can say, based on that information that was given to you, whether it complies with something in the regulations. And Mr. Chalder can say to you, I stand by my opinion, I still don't agree. And it's advisory to you. That's just advice that he gives you, but it's for this commission to decide whether you think our proposal complies with your regulations. We believe it does. Whether it advances the vision in your POCD and in the town center zone, we believe it does. But it's up for you to decide if you agree with him or not. But I just don't think it's necessary, especially given that length of time involved and the amount of work that's gone into this. All of the responsive information we've given with really, I don't think there's anything new, but you can correct me that, that we need to do to answer questions that have been raised. So I wouldn't be inclined to agree to it, to continuing the hearing just for Mr. Chalder to finalize his report, respectfully, but for those reasons.
Chairman? We received a 24-page report tonight that we hadn't seen before we got here at 6:30. There may be concerns and questions generated by reading that report tomorrow or in the next week, so I'm not in favor of closing the hearing at all.
All right, any other?
My personal feeling is to leave it open for the report. I mean, that way they can react. They can't make a change. They can't do anything.
Right, then
It's
we're
up to
done.
us, and we can just say, you know what?
Yeah, I would agree.
So if we keep it open, we can limit it.
I can't even see limiting it at this point because there's so many outstanding things that we received tonight that, I mean, not that we're going to go over the same information.
But what stops it? What stops from going over? Because we did that tonight. We went over the same information tonight that we did at the last meeting.
Right.
But I think,
And I'm not saying it was a bad thing. I'm just saying because
Yeah.
but how do we stop that for the next meeting? How do we limit the next meeting in fairness to the applicant and also in fairness to us?
This, and I would agree, we went over and above for keeping this public hearing open for the second time, and you know, for anybody to comment
In a
on any
general-
of the
in a
comments.
general
In a
broad-
general
yeah.
way. Usually, when we have a public hearing, you know, we say, okay, you know, it's limited to issues raised at the next public hearing. So, I think what we would probably do is, you know, keep it open, but just for Glenn Childers' report and any other open items, and that's it.
any other materials that we received tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, but limited, and it's not going to be,
Correct.
you know,
Yep.
new issues that are being brought out.
Okay.
But for us to do that, we need an extension granted from the applicant.
Yeah.
Just make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, as I'm sure you can understand, it becomes a lengthy and expensive process to keep a hearing open and to, you know, to be going back and forth on this stuff. Not that we're unwilling to answer the questions. I would just ask if there's anything the commission can do to tighten up that time frame and not have to go out another month and a half before we come back
January
again.
19th.
I
We would
think-
really appreciate it, but if it's your strong preference for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, we'll consent to it.
I think what we'll do, and again, I believe what I read is, you know, you have certain time frame for the consultant to respond. The consultant cannot take forever to respond because that's not a fair process to the applicant. So I think we have to put a limitation on Glenn Shoulder and say, you know, give us by certain date.
Well,
So,
I mean,
and if he doesn't, then that's what it is. I mean, it's you know, we have to decide.
Well, what is that time frame? So we're
I
all on
think it was,
The next meeting is
35
January
days.
19th.
But I guess it's 35 days from what?
Yeah,
I don't see, I mean, I don't see
there
us
was-
meeting the 22nd, but the 29th, I don't know how the commission feels about that, or the 5th. I know we had
Of which month?
tentatively set, pardon?
Of January?
Yes.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
that's, I mean, the 29th of December is closer
I
than
would not go for that.
but I don't know how the commission feels about that, or January 5th, maybe for a special meeting. And I know that might be a PIC meeting, but I don't know how the applicant.
pick meeting.
And that's, I mean, the 29th is within the 30-day time frame, I believe.
You're not going to get
One,
anybody for the 29th, that's for sure, between the two.
29th is within the 30-day time frame, but I don't know how
yeah.
this
that-
commission
that'd
feels or what's going
be-
on.
That will be tough. I think,
Commissioner Robbins brought up a time frame for our consultant of
For the
35 days.
consultant to respond, it didn't say 35
But
days. for
35
us
days
to
from what
schedule
point?
the
From
next
the
meeting.
request or from the meeting?
We could just tell him to give us a damn report.
Well, I'm, well,
Well, he didn't.
Right,
Yeah, he
that's right.
didn't.
I mean,
And
it's not,
there was a-
we're not doing
he
this for
had-
his convenience, we're
Right.
doing this for ours
Yes.
and the
And
applicant.
it's advisory, keep
it's
that in mind.
advisory, so if.
It's
if he gives
advisory.
it, you know, I mean, that's. we
The whole
can't be
thing about,
waiting
you
for-
can't deal with, I mean, under state law now,
Right,
the whole word character, that can't be dealt with. And
Right.
that's an amendment that will be coming down the pike, because the word character is used throughout several municipalities' regulations all the time, and we now have to change that.
Let's just settle on a date and do it, and tell him he has to have it a week
Oh,
before
I understand that.
our meeting.
I understand that.
So I
Right
would-
now, we need, the commission to come up with a date.
What is the earliest we can do in January? And that's the-
I mean, we could go the 5th. We had a tentative plan implementation committee scheduled. We can change that.
okay.
We could change
How
that.
about January 5th? We can go January 5th.
I don't know if that's,
Do we know, before I respond to that, when we would get Mr. Chalder's report by then? I wouldn't want to insist on an
will-
early date, and then we get his report 2 days before, and because
Then
our.
we're
I
presenting-
will-
Then we're presenting something new to you, and then you're holding it open because it's something new. So that's what we're trying to avoid.
And
I'll
we have
reach
to-
out. I'm not in tomorrow, but I'll reach out to him tomorrow.
Yeah, we have to give him deadline, hopefully, to
Yeah,
give enough time to the, developer to react.
I'll call him
it's-
tomorrow
it's-
morning, but I.
It's a
won't be-
week.
Yeah.
What's the deadline we're gonna give them? 27th, 28th, 29th?
I mean, this,
Okay. I'll make a motion that we,
no, I think,
You gotta ask us,
I
you
think
have
we
to
have
ask
to
us
ask,
for permission, actually.
yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
well, if it's January 5th, we don't.
Or no?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we
I
do.
I
We
thought
do.
you said
That's
January
January
5th was in the 30
No,
days.
I said the 29th
Oh,
29th
okay.
is the,
would be good.
We're willing to consent to having the public hearing open to the 5th.
all right.
We really
and-
just strongly ask that we get these reports. Whatever other outstanding reports we have, we don't get them the day of like his last time, so we have something to respond to.
Can we say a deadline in fairness to the applicant and
How about,
27th or whatever it
I
is?
think it's, how about
A week before?
23rd
23rd of what?
of December?
December?
That's a week, I mean.
Oh, his
any-
deadline.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I
He
thought you were
had-
going to make the
he had
meeting.
this- He had this since last meeting. I mean, he responded on December 1st.
Well, it seems like he just responded a couple days before December 1st, and he's got 35 days. So in theory, it seems as if he has almost up until that date.
When did he get? I think it's,
Well, let's just give him a date.
I don't know when he was given.
I said, I'm good with the 23rd or the 27th.
all right.
For his report.
For his-
Okay.
Or have his report
Yeah.
to the town, and then the town disperse it to the applicant.
All right,
But that's not part of our motion, that's just a
Right,
statement to the
so
staff,
now
right?
we need,
so now so.
My understanding is that
No later than 27th?
the
you will get-
the commission's going to be directing Mr. Chalder, you're saying?
Yeah, no
Correct.
later than 27th.
We're giving you we're consenting to hold the public hearing to January 5th. That's what we're doing.
okay.
That's what's
Yep.
being asked.
So, do you want to make
Okay.
the motion? You want me to, or?
You got it all written out, so.
I already started.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Motion to recess the public hearing until January 5th, 2022 at 6:30 PM
We're not,
to review the materials, to cover the materials that we received tonight and the consultant's report that we'll receive by, I think we said the 27th.
I just had one more, and then I'll move away if you want to bring somebody else up, Mr. Chairman. Just any commissioner that has questions on stuff that we've submitted, if you would like to and you're able to, if you want to send emails to Kim and she forwards them to me ahead of time, please do. I just wanted to welcome and encourage that, because if we get to January 5th and hear the questions for the first time, obviously, we're not going to be able to be done, so.
Yeah, so we'll make sure, like, whatever we have, we can respond.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine for any commissioner to do that, and we'll work on it ahead of time so we can give you an informed answer on the 5th.
oh, if we have a second.
Can we do that?
To him.
Let's get those two questions.
We can do that?
We'll just
You
take
can
them.
email me.
Okay.
You can't email each other.
No, we can email each other, we can email
You
through.
can email me.
Oh, we don't do that.
That's good.
If I can, I'll just ask the gentleman there, because you just raised your hand about, yeah, Mr. Chudzik, can you please come to the podium and,
I don't think we have a second. Did we have a second?
Second.
no,
We're not going to recess yet because we have questions.
Because he has questions, so I just.
So, okay. Well, it's up to the commission.
Well,
No.
Okay, I'm
My-
going to
my
withdraw my motion.
I
we
withdraw.
can-
Yep.
my question was about the building 8, if that could be shifted and taking the secondary driveway out because it's going to cause a lot of traffic onto our road. And we didn't discuss it. It's the second time I asked that question. So there was no answer.
Yeah, I think they.
So can we, I guess, bring this back up on screen possibly?
We can see it here.
He has to show up for the public.
Is everybody seeing this on your screens?
Yep.
Okay, so what we've, go ahead.
Couple things. So, one, we believe that the Pratt Street entrance, it exists today. We feel it's important to our project. We did analysis that, I know that driveway with the building being vacant for 18 years, but when Ames was there, our traffic will be significantly less than that. We did provide 3 means of egress, so it's not like this is the only way into it, but we feel strongly so. At this point, our proposal is to keep the Pratt Street access, and we've included in our traffic study that access point, and we showed that there was no negative impact on the thing. In terms of Building 8, as Mark indicated, and I apologize for the rendering, it is a 2-story building. The setback, your setback in that area is 25 feet. The building is 40 feet off the property line, so we did slide it off the property line. The building is located in an existing parking lot. It's level. As we shift to the other side, the topography starts dropping off. And that is also, as we shift in that area, it also moves into the town's regulated area for wetlands. So we want to keep the building out of that area and keep it on the level parking lot. But so we put a green screen in and we pulled the building off the setback. So we're at 40 feet instead of 25 feet.
And I believe the existing trees that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. He also asked about the tree line. The other thing is we put the building in a location that we expect the existing tree line adjacent to the neighborhood will be retained, except we put additional evergreens at the toe of that area. So he did ask about a bunch of white pines. If they're on the property line, we're not touching those, and that's why we pulled it off.
And that's what I'm trying to get in here at this point, to try and get closer to that view. This is asking a lot for this little tablet to do.
Oh, he's way behind.
But this is through Google Earth. This is obviously has some of those trees in here. The one thing that you'll notice from here, if I can get this to pan up enough without crashing, which I just think it did. There it goes. There's that's the height of the existing Ames building right there in relation to our buildings. So this is that 3-4 split that we've been talking about, building 7. The other building that we're referring to, which is the 2-story, is basically, like now it brought us into street view. It's basically over here to your left. That's where that building is. Mm-hmm. But like I say, with the existing trees that are there and the screen buffer that we're putting on, and the fact that we have pulled that away as well.
Talk to
Yeah,
So,
All right.
okay, that's
Okay,
That's good.
You ready?
yep.
okay.
Oh, come on.
No new question, just
Just to your point,
Yep.
almost all of you asked about the setback. Can you give them a direction for the next time they come back that they show you a different plan with a setback? I don't think they answered that.
that's. We have raised the question and they will come back with whatever they come back. So you.
Okay, I'm going to add that to my motion. Okay?
No, but they, I think the response was that this is what it is, that's what they are proposing.
They'll look at
Yeah,
moving it back, but they can't move it
they
back.
can't
30
move it
feet.
back, because that's, they,
And it's a whole new application.
it's a whole new application, because then everything will be brand new. So,
Okay, but we're not obligated, well, we can't do this during the hearing. Okay. I'm going to make a motion to recess until January 5th, 2022 at 6:30 for the following purposes. First of all, a corrected site plan to reflect the errors in the building heights. You have two buildings that you say 3 stories, they're really only 2, and we've gone all these weeks thinking there were 3. To review and address questions generated by materials that we received tonight, and to review and respond to questions that we may have from the consultant's report, which is going to be delivered to us by the 27th. Okay. And I guess that is the motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you.
We're still in a meeting. Excuse us, we are still meeting.
All right, we'll go
My
to,
God. Doesn't matter.
go to item 2.
3.
Item 3, public comments. If there is anyone in the public who would like to address the commission on any issues not on the agenda. I don't see. We move on to item 4. Consent
Motion
agenda.
to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Item agenda 5A.
It's
We
not
already-
needed
We already
because of
did. 6A. Any,
You're up.
A, B, C, or
zoning
D.
enforcement updates. We're having a lot of erosion issues lately because the weather's been so warm, believe it or not, and with some of the rains we've had. So that's basically what our main enforcement issues have been of late. So that's our primary thing we've been dealing with lately.
6B. Minor,
Minor modifications, none.
none. C.
We were going to be possibly meeting the 5th, but we'll have to, the chairman and I will discuss that.
Yep.
I know that the consultant, Pam Roach with Sustainable CT, is looking to set up a meeting with
D.
legislative update. We're still waiting on the state for the recreational marijuana regulations. I think a lot of that is with the Social Equity Council, trying to make sure that locations are fair and equitable with the populations. So they're looking at that. We do have some regulations that are going to public hearing in January that deal with Public Act 2129. So we're starting to chip away at that, and we'll be looking at some others for the February meeting as well. So we'll have some new regulations. I know I'm kind of speeding through things because it's late.
Kim, can we keep in mind our never-ending sidewalk conversation and the ordinance and making sure that we
Correct.
still have, I just want to perpetually keep on talking about it.
Yeah, we were supposed to get the, go to the
Ordinance.
town council and have
Yeah.
them modify it,
Yep.
correct?
Yep. I just want to make sure that we keep on talking about it, so
Okay.
Item 7, communications.
I don't even know where my packet went, so I don't know that we had any outside of what was directed for tonight's hearing.
Could I ask a quick question?
Yep.
Kim, did we issue minutes for the special hearing on December 1st?
The minutes, we have those, but
Okay.
that wasn't.
But we haven't handed them out or anything, right? They're just on the website or something?
I don't
It'll be
even
coming.
think they're on the website
They weren't in our
yet.
package, and they're not on
They
the
were?
agenda for approval.
Oh, okay. So we'll have them for the next meeting.
Okay.
They went to then? Okay. I have the actions. I don't know that I have the,
They're done, I'll have to see.
okay.
All right, item
There were a
A.
lot of things going on in your life.
I don't
at
think
the
we have
time.
any bills, right?
So, no.
Can I just make a comment?
Okay, yep.
Could we get the materials for the next meeting before the afternoon, before the meeting?
Because of the time frame, yeah, there were a lot of things going on, and I was off several days for reasons that I can't tell you, but yes.
Because we got everything, I got mine at 2:30 yesterday afternoon, which
Yesterday afternoon.
normally we get the Friday
Did I?
before.
Yeah, I got mine at 4 yesterday afternoon.
Because they went. Wow.
No,
Oh, you
I
got
don't-
it.
I think I got mine on Monday.
yeah, I got earlier.
I got this
Special.
thing.
I got mine last week. No, joking.
You guys are special.
Wow.
Yeah, I got this on yesterday about
Typically, they go
2:30.
out the week.
I got mine yesterday around 4.
I think I got mine on Monday night.
Yep. I put my
Good
date.
for you.
See, I learned from you to put my
Okay.
date on when I get it.
All right,
To adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
That's
Motion
not
passes.